psychology. My name is Ryan Holsapple, and today I have for you a roller coaster of a podcast with my friend and a great philosopher named Tim Freke. Tim and myself go back several years now. We did a filming with Ken Wilber in which he debated and discussed the universe with Ken for quite some time, back I think in 2017. And today we are having our own debate about the origins of the universe. And we get gridlocked in certain areas, and we have different definitions and different conceptions of for example, of consciousness, or what constitutes sentience in a biological organism. Do single cells have experiences, or experiences only reserved for the higher level emergent being, so on and so forth. So you decide for yourself how to interpret it all. If you get annoyed with us going in circles, totally understandable. Just know that we did this podcast for ourselves. So we were just sharing it as a gesture that we thought it was an interesting discussion, but we totally understand if you listen to it and you go, would you guys get off of this the same thing? You've said this 300 times. Just turn it off and listen to another podcast if it bothers you that much. We really needed to get into the nitty-gritty explanations of what we were saying, and for me it was worth the risk of repeating myself just to really flesh out the ideas. And I enjoyed this conversation tremendously. I just left it feeling just a deep love for Tim and appreciation for the dialogue. It's so important to have a interlocutor that is competent and capable of pushing you as a someone who has a theory or a position or an idea to be more clear, to be more concise, to have better definitions, to have more robust ideas. And it just simply doesn't happen if we're just thinking in our own echo chambers. So I viewed this conversation as a great learning opportunity for myself. I walked away from it seeing areas where I can continue to strengthen my own position and discover where I discover how to explore the ideas I'm interested in a more coherent manner. That's the way to put it. Tim has a website, timfreke.com. He does spirituality workshops where people do amazing exercises together, and they awaken a state of love and connection within themselves and with each other. He's not only a philosopher, he's also a spiritual teacher, and those things go hand in hand for Tim. His philosophy and his spirituality are married in a very important sense, and he's a thinker that feels it's very important that our ideas are grounded and sensible and are built upon a structure of rationality. I don't know if he'd use those exact terms, but that they're robust, that they are more than just fanciful ideas, that they are based in reason and logic and sound theory. And he really makes that important. And he also elevates the importance of love and spiritual awakening. And so he's a very unique thinker in that he doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on either side of the equation, because so often you might have a spiritual teacher who has these great big ideas and these great big spiritual awakenings to offer, and yet when you scrutinize the structure of their system of thinking, it falls apart. And my experience of Tim is that he finds it to be very important that is not the case for himself, and that we leave a legacy behind for the future generations where they are robust thinkers, and that they can understand the spiritual and philosophical as a union rather than as a division, and that the sense-making process that we go through ultimately feeds that unifying perspective of emergent reality that Tim elevates in his philosophy. At any rate, if that's not a good enough explanation, find out more about Tim for yourself. He has a YouTube channel, listen to this podcast, and that we decided to share it with you all just in case you might find it interesting. So let's go explore what is the universe? What does it all mean? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Why are we here? I mean, we ask every question that philosophers have been asking for thousands of years. So I think this is a fun one. I certainly don't think we figured it all out, but I think we had a really great discussion about it. So I've hit the record button, and the way I'm looking at it is we just go where we want to go, and if we want to use it for something, then it's an option. If not, then it's just for us. How's that feel?
Fantastic. Perfect. Okay. Yeah.
So what's new with you? What are you up to these days?
Recovering from COVID, yeah, which has been a real pain in the ass, really. It was. I mean, I haven't been hospitalized or remotely in chest or anything like that, so I'm not really one to complain. It was pretty light, I guess, like flu, but it's just hanging on, and because I'm so keen to make the most of my time, it's when patience is not my greatest virtue. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
So I'm having to learn a bit of patience.
So because you've had it for weeks essentially, right?
Yeah, I had it for about 3 or 4 weeks. Well, I was just knocked out, and then it went. It was like hallelujah, and then it just keeps coming back enough to lay me flat. And so each day is a kind of fluctuation. I know lots of people here who are getting it that way, so it seems to be a common way that people are.
Is it the fatigue that grabs you the most, or?
Yeah, fatigue. There's some other symptoms as well, but that's the one that stops me being able to do as much work as I like.
Yeah.
So but I've just had a rest, so I'm hoping I'm going to be what I do find is that when I engage with someone I like talking to, then, I don't notice, at least for a while. So.
Well, what I know about you is that you're constantly thinking on your feet. So there's no way you're thinking exactly the same way today as last time we talked. So
I don't expect so. So
no, I mean, if there's anything I can count on with you, it's that you're willing to change, and that is actually one of the. I look at that as a major feature of an adaptive thinker, because so often we get fixated on what do we want to believe, but I've watched you since the day I met you, and you don't cast anything in concrete, do you?
No.
I love that. I mean, what a wonderful way to do philosophy.
It is, Ryan, but as someone who's young, I have to tell you, it's not a good way to build a career. Because people like consistency, because it takes a long time.
Right. They want predictability.
But when you constantly have the thing where people are contacting you going, "Oh, I read your book, it was fantastic." You go, "Oh, I'm so pleased. By the way, I've changed my mind." Like, what?
Yeah.
So that's the price. But yeah, no, it's moving like mad. There is a consistency though.
Sure, that's for sure.
A real consistency. It's more about what's happening is that the underlying philosophy, which was in Soul Story when we first met, and we did the filming with Ken Wilber, and I am busy fleshing it out, and I'm working on what will be, I think, an audio project of quite some length, and I've been working on it for a long time, and it's all here, literally right there now. And it's
really,
it just needs, and it's all sorted, but not sorted enough.
Is this an audio book?
I'm seeing it. I want to create a kind of a new form. I'm sure people have done things like it, but for me, it's the form that seems appropriate to me, which I'm provisionally calling a pod book, which is a cross between a book and a podcast. So
awesome.
It's the idea that, when I write a book, everything is highly structured, because what idea you'd say when,
right,
governs how well it works, and clarity and the ability for people to get what could be otherwise complex ideas, so they actually get them, is key. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm structuring the ideas. I'm working out what language is the best language to use to express the ideas, and that takes me a long time. And then when I finish doing that, which I thought I'd probably finish a year or more ago, but I still haven't, then the aim is that I'll do it as individual audio episodes.
Oh, that's going to be great.
So it won't be written. It's not like reading a book. It'll be like, oh, I want to put across that idea. Right, bang, and have a go. And so it's got the spontaneity, because I think that plays to my strengths of being able to do that. So it'll have the structure of a book, but the spontaneity of a podcast. That's the aim.
And coming back to something you mentioned, you said I've still got some really core themes.
Yeah.
It's not that I just shift off those core themes. It's that is it that you're expanding the nuance, you're tuning the details?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and also being able to work out what is the underlying idea. And I think the underlying idea, one of the underlying ideas is to understand everything within one narrative, and that one narrative is evolution, which I would call it the realization of potentiality on ever more emergent levels.
Yes, and I think we're going to have some interesting discussions about that, because I watched your Castro podcast, which was wonderful, and I've watched a big chunk of your non-duality recent podcast. I forget the woman's name. She was talking about her experience with spirituality and coming out of this sort of really intense, extreme view of non-duality and coming back to accepting being human and things like that. So I'm really excited to chat with you about these topics.
Yeah, I mean, well, how did it strike you? I mean, because there's an example where it's like, so the fundamental idea in Soul Story was there's one evolutionary current,
right,
and it goes, but it carries on past biology.
Yes.
So it's not just pre-physical information, physics, biology, the psyche, but that's really an appendage to biology. Not that, but actually the psyche arising as a whole new level of information, it being as much of an ecology of the psyche as biology is an ecology. In biology, and that is what spirituality is exploring.
And remind me, do you look at that as an energy field, the psyche?
No.
Okay.
No.
So like, before I weigh in on it, do you see it as, how do you see it? What is the medium? So if it's not the body and it's not an energy field, then what holds the psyche? What gives it substance?
I think everything is the evolution of information, where information is what informs the underlying field of being.
Right.
So for me, look, what's the basic quality? If everything's evolving, what's the basic quality that's evolving? Well, the common quality that everything has is very obvious, but it's being.
Mm-hmm.
And so being is in the process of becoming. It's a very old idea.
Yeah.
And that becoming, it seems to me, is the evolution of information into what I call passivity systems, which is patterns that repeat.
I love your idea of passivity. It's one that's really stuck with me.
So
because the past
time
accumulates. I mean, that just resonates. That fits. And it not only does it fit intuitively, I mean, it makes sense logically if you look at the way nature works, for example. In every way. So the whole universe, there's a paper actually come out since we've talked, which has got a great title, Ryan. It was 12 physicists, I think, one from America and Canada. I know Lee Smolin was one. I can't remember the names of the others. Called the autodidactic universe, the self-learning universe. Yeah. And that captures the idea. So this is being discussed in physics now as well. So it's not just oddball philosophers like me. And it's because of AI, I think. It's because we've discovered, you can set up a computer so it can learn. Right. You don't have to just teach it. Right. It can learn. So in which case, maybe the universe is a comparable system which can just learn how to be a universe. It doesn't have to be told how to be a universe. It can learn how. Creatively, it can. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm with you there. So I want to go ahead, please finish. So what I'm trying to do, one of the things I'm trying to do on a very basic level in regard to science is go, look, can we articulate that idea that there is an evolutionary process based on, well, I've got it down to 3 principles at the moment, and which is that everything repeats the patterns that have conditioned being before. Okay. Habits of nature, as Sheldrake put it. Yeah. So you've got if you imagine a field of being Yeah.
And like you would like a quantum field and information informing that in various ways, that the potentiality, which is the field, could be anything. But once you've set up the pattern, it will tend to be that. And once the pattern is very well established, it will tend to act in those ways, which is what happens on the physical level, hence the level of repetition.
But it could also change at any moment.
But all of those patterns, first of all of it's probability.
Right.
Because everything, it's all conditioning something that could be anything. Right. So nothing's ever a closed shop, which is why you get in physics on the quantum level, it's the probabilities. But also, they're all interacting with each other. So no moment is ever and can ever be the same, not least because it contains more information than the moment before. So you've got two principles there. You've got passivity, repetition, and creativity, novelty.
Yeah.
And then I think the third one you've got is sustainability. It's like when something novel arises, it needs to be able to sustain itself within the informational ecology. And with those, then suddenly you've got a very simple philosophical principle that you can apply to the evolution, not just of the biological universe, because that's the underlying pattern, of course, in Darwin and all the other theories of biological evolution, repetition and the throwing up of novelty and what fits in continues, but also the physical universe, and I think the psychological universe with ideas and all the rest.
And that brings me to my question about information and psyche, which is that, so you
help
me. Well, yeah, that's where I'm stuck, because and maybe there's a blind spot in what I can understand about it. But what I understand about information is, for example, cells hold information for the body, right? So there's a vehicle through which the information is.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so how would information? So there's a free floating.
I think that's why I say, look, what I'm working with is, look, there's the universe here.
Okay.
But there's also what David Bohm, the physicist, talked about the implicate and the explicate, and I think
I've heard that.
So what I'm saying is not that dissimilar. I don't think is that there's an implicate order, and that's the past, and so that there's what I call an infoverse, which is all of the information of the past. It's a bit like looking at a screen on a computer, and what you see is a tiny fraction of what the hell's going on to make it happen.
Yes. Yeah.
And the same with this.
But what is it? What is the info? Like, I want to make my point more clear. Like, if I look at the genome, for example, I can say, well, there is the information. There, like I can posit the information's there. But
you can say that with anything.
Right. But I'm saying that when you strip it of a substrate, then what is it? Is it, if it's not energy, because then that I could buy, okay, it's some sort of energy. But if it's not energy, what is information?
Okay, so the thing about energy is it's a relationship.
Yes.
Everything is a relationship. One of the other underlying ideas for me is that this is the universe is a one.
Right.
So this is the one in relationship to itself in all of these different passivity systems. So we're two systems in relation. And energy is a relationship. It tends to be talked about as if it's some sort of thing but it's not.
It's a process.
Everything's process.
Yeah.
Because everything is a flow of time, and everything's relationship, and energy's relationship. It's not like a big buzzy thing.
No, I'm with you there. I agree with the relationship.
And I think that's important to get. That's why to me it's definitely not energy, because energy is something which it's a relationship that has the power to change other relationships.
Well, isn't that what you're saying with information?
Well, partly. So I would say that energy is a type of information.
Okay, rather than information as a type of energy.
And the one that really got me with it, Ryan, I mean, this is really obvious. I mean, like with everything, nearly all of it is like when I've looked at myself, was working on this a few years back, and just went, when I think about energy and when I hear people talk about it, coming back to the information, just we're going to deal with energy first.
Yeah.
I tend to imagine, like, when you hear like energy can't be created or destroyed. It's like, so the universe, there's this energy and there's a certain amount of it.
Yeah.
And then it's become everything.
Yeah.
And realizing that was completely wrong. And that energy was relational, so that what's happening at the beginning of the universe is you're getting a creation of negative and positive energy. the energy which is pulling things apart, and the energy which is pulling things back together.
Right.
And as there's a great line in, I think it's Hawking,
Yeah.
where he goes, look, in that way, ultimately, the amount of energy in the universe is exactly zero. And so that it's like going, and that's why you can't create or destroy it. Because
Sure.
it's a relationship. So it's a bit like, if you move something to the left, the right will be further away. And it's not because left can't be destroyed, or it's like there's just, here's the one that I got it with, which was which kind of interests me, which was thinking about, so I'm going to lift up my phone, and then I've used kinetic energy, which I've got from food and all the rest of it, and I've used that energy to lift the phone.
Right.
But the phone is now higher from the earth, which is why it's been effort for me to do it.
Right.
So it now contains more potential energy than it had before.
Right.
But there's nothing, I haven't put anything in it.
No.
It's not little bits of energy have gone in. Its relationship is what's changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the way I wouldn't say relationship discounts the idea of energy. It's just more dynamic.
Energy obviously exists.
Okay,
because
got it.
Energy is running everything.
Yeah,
but ultimately it is relational.
I could agree with that.
So it itself needs to be in a context.
Yes.
So what's the context in which all of these relationships exist? So I'm suggesting that context is information, what I call the field of being, which something which is. And I take the field analogy from physics because it feels very paralogical to me. It's like, okay, so information is something which exists in a field.
Yeah.
The field is something which contains information.
Yeah.
So let's imagine an ultimate field which contains all of the information of the universe.
Yeah.
And that's the infoverse, which is working itself out as in this moment where all of those systems are changing in relationship with each other. And that's where you've got all of those relationships. So that ultimately all information.
Yeah.
So I've started, this is really new stuff. So, I haven't really expressed this to anyone. Right. So it might be complete gobbledygook.
I'm just learning. So let's keep going. Don't worry about it.
So if that's right, if there's an infoverse, which is running the universe, as it were, all of the accumulated patterns of the past, which are interacting now, that infoverse isn't encoded in anything in the universe. So it's the other way around. It's the universe is actually where all of that information in the infoverse is interacting, which casts all of those things where you're going, is information encoded in the cells, or is it the other way around? Is it information in the infoverse which is organizing the cells, and the cells, which are themselves information, being organizing lower levels, which they're manipulating? And you've got and even with the genome, is it that the genome has got the information in it, or is it that it's a system that relates to the infoverse in such a way that certain bits of information get passed on in certain contexts?
Okay, there's a lot there. First, I would say it's all relative, right? So what's information depends on who's the information relevant to, right? So it's information on the level of how the cell works in the body, right? But if you're looking at it from this meta monistic point of view, so what I'm here, tell me if I'm getting this right. The appearances of life are encoded processes of this infoverse that we can't perceive. We can
perceive it. We are perceiving it. It's just we perceive it as this.
Okay.
And then we can use the psyche, which is what science is doing constantly, to project into it to work out how it's doing this.
Right.
What are the rules? What are the algorithms? What are the, whatever analogy you use, habits, which are playing themselves out? Now, if you indulge in presentism, the idea that all that exists is the present moment, then somehow all that information is in something now. But if you don't have that, if you have this idea of an expanding universe, so that time is expanding like space is expanding.
Yeah.
And there's more and more of the past, and it hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
It contains all the patterns which are governing the present.
Yeah.
That's where the information is. And it's not all encoded in the present.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define present.
Well, the present,
if you define it in terms of relative time, but if you look at, you could say the present is that whole thing, technically,
if you
right?
said that, then
yeah,
yes,
you could
would.
say,
But I think the common idea that I see in spirituality and science is that there's a now. I mean, obviously in science it's a relative now, but nevertheless it is a now.
Yeah.
And that's what exists. I mean, you don't get that. Also, the other extreme is you get the block universe and it all exists. It's all fixed, which is a horrible idea. So what I'm exploring is much more like, there was a guy called Broad in the 20s in the UK, I believe, who's an emergentist philosopher. And he talked about what he called not the block universe, but the expanding block universe. So it's like, for Einstein, it was all fixed, which is a ghastly deterministic view, I think.
Right.
But for this, it's like, well, the past is fixed and it's expanding into possibility.
Yes. Yeah.
But the present isn't fixed.
Right.
Sorry, not the future.
Right. No, that makes sense. So help me a little more. I'm still trying to understand what this infoverse, because when you, right after you said this is a really big idea, you then talked about what if everything is, it's not that the cells have the information or the physical has the information, it's that it's an encoded process that is a part of this infoverse. And then I tried to picture it, but it gave me sort of a Kantian impression where I was like, well, what is it that,
try this. This is the best I can do at the moment.
Okay.
Which is to go, okay, so how would that be structured? If that's the case, if that's the implicate or system that's running the universe, then and I started thinking about, in biology, the phylogenetic tree, where you see this tree, which is, traces back all the ancestors to Luca, the common first cell.
Right.
So I thought, well, if the whole universe is evolving, then maybe we can think about the same thing as an infogenetic tree.
Okay.
Where you can trace back the evolution of everything to the Big Bang. Then,
right.
So if you imagine, maybe the system that is running the infoverse is like a infogenetic tree in which new levels of passivity and new individual systems of passivity are arising, so that every system has its past and is worked into the past of systems like it. And when you get a jump where systems combine, you get a higher level ordered passivity. So molecules forming atoms,
sure,
the holon idea. And now you've got a higher level of passivity, which is governing the lower levels, which are governing lower levels.
Right.
And so if you imagine it like that, by the time you get to the body, then what I'm saying is, look, the body is not what it's made of.
Sure.
The body is the passivity system that organizes the cells.
Okay.
That's what it is, and which is why cells come and go all the time.
So it's an information system that organizes the physical world.
Which organizes. It's an information super system which organizes subsystems. In this case, it's the complete opposite of the reductionist idea that it's all really on the bottom and the rest.
Oh, sure.
It is going no. These systems are working in every direction. So they are organizing the lesser levels, and so the body is an information system on a biological level, organizing lower levels of biology, which are organizing physical systems, and down they go.
And the psyche's the level above the body.
Then you get the psyche. So then it's like, what the hell's that? And then you're into, I think, because the psyche is such a, we could have the same conversation about how the hell did systems move from physical into biological, because that's a massive jump, isn't it, as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, we don't even know.
The next big jump is the psyche. So I think what's
possibly, unless you posit the psyche as inherent to life, which is one idea that could be considered. You could think as soon as life begins, there's cognition, there's activity, there's sensation, there's some form of subjectivity occurring.
Yeah, I mean, you can, but
and I actually tend to believe that, rather than saying that somehow along the way there was enough connection within the system for some sort of experiential component to emerge, because then you just have a problem of where do you draw that line, right?
I would take it down further, Ryan. I would go, look, the whole way through, what you've got is systems in relationship with each other. And all those systems are reading and responding in ways which are appropriate to the system. So if you're going down, and the first level that's going to happen on, we could call maybe electrochemical.
Sure.
And that's reading, and every system is its own subject.
Yeah, but let me stop you there, because the important distinction is scientists will draw a line and say it could be doing it as an automata, right? It could be doing it mechanically.
It is doing it as an automata. It's not conscious of it.
Well, we don't know that.
Don't we?
No, we don't know that. For all we know, there could be a phenomenology to single cell organisms, for example.
Well, there could be.
No, there's more than could. There's more and more research coming out.
Doesn't seem very plausible. It seems very plausible that they are responding. And it feels,
but what you have to answer is how you can create a deterministic algorithm creatively. But I don't see any evidence that you can determine creativity. I don't see any evidence you can start.
They're opposites.
Right.
They're opposites.
So the idea that you have a system beforehand that's quote unquote unconscious or non-sentient, that then evolves into this creative thing that is sentient and conscious, you've got a huge problem of how that occurs.
I don't think you've got a problem at all. I think we can actually understand that. I think it fits with what we see. I think what's happened is that in the process of emergence, those relationships are what everything is relational, remember? So those relationship is what is evolved. So I would be much more tempted to say, look, rather than making wild speculative things about atoms having consciousness or anything, is to go, look, what we mean by that word is something which even yourself, you're conscious now, but you won't be later when you sleep, or if I'm not.
I don't agree. It depends on how you define consciousness. Well, if I have a dream, I'll be having an experience if I'm dreaming.
You will if you have a dream, but if you don't have a dream, you won't be. And there's an awful lot of information which you're taking in right now, which you're taking in unconsciously, most of it.
No, non-explicitly, not unconsciously. That means I'm not focused on it. I mean, the conscious, it depends on how you define consciously.
But that is unconscious, isn't it? If you're not focused on it.
Look at all the activities my cells are doing right now, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
How do I know that non-cognitive, explicit narrative identity is not involved? That does not necessitate non-conscious. Non-conscious is a made-up term.
But all you've done, Ryan, and I mean, it's not you, it's like loads of people do this, but I did it. All you've done is just redefine conscious.
Yeah.
And if you've done that, but that's fine, but then you've lost that word.
Well, it depends on which, if you want to take where Descartes started with it, which is thinking consciousness means thinking about thinking. That's fine, but that's one idea.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, look, we can use whichever word you like, because the key thing is the ideas behind.
Yes.
But the fact is, there is something which is, I don't know, something whereby you are aware of, let's use a different word. You're aware of this, but you're taking in a lot of information you're not aware of, and you're saying your cells are obviously taking it in. Well, they're taking it in, but in the way that we are not aware of it, or whatever word you want. We have to have a word for that. If you lose the word for that, you've lost a huge concept, and you've just mushed it in.
Mm-hmm.
So if whatever that word is, that is not there for us all the time. It doesn't seem to be in inanimate matter. It doesn't seem to be in plant life, although it is reading the universe.
No, but even plants show incredible responses to their environment. They can learn. For example,
I know.
So
I'm saying the whole universe is learning, Ryan.
No, I'm with you, but I'm saying I don't believe that learning occurs in the dark blindly.
Of course it does. We know.
I don't believe that.
Well, you can autonomotor learn.
But that's different. That's setting up. You pre-state the system beforehand. You know you know the boundary conditions, you know how you want to set up the logical deductions. Okay, so you can set that and set it loose. Okay, and then
it's much more than that now.
Okay, tell me more.
I mean, AI learning systems are extraordinary.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that
they can learn, and they can learn how to learn.
Yeah, but you've programmed all that in.
No, you haven't. That's the point.
In order for it to.
But you really haven't.
Okay, to explain it then.
It's learning. It's learning how to learn. That's the point. So the idea.
But it's learning how to learn from a system that you set up from the beginning, that it can do associations, and those associations can be built, but they're not unlimited, like conscious associations. Am I wrong about that? For example.
Well, look, I think you're wrong about the second bit.
Okay, tell me. Tell me. I'm not an AI expert, so I want to learn.
So look, the key thing is, it's like I am absolutely with you. Plants are responding. Everything is responding.
Right.
Physical matter is responding.
Right.
You know, put two chemicals together, they explode. Well, that's a pretty big response.
Yeah.
So the whole universe is different passivity systems in relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
It's the relationship which is evolving, and it's the relationship that will become sentient, and it's the relationship that will become consciously sentient, and it's the relationship that will lead to psyche, not because somehow all those later things were already there, like life maybe was already there, I don't know, or psyche, or it's actually the opposite. It's like they have, as they seem to, from what we know, the relationships, which is starting with the simplest things you can imagine.
Yeah, sure.
Is turning into ever more complex ways of reading the universe.
I think that's very easy to accept. Relationships are getting more complex. What I don't understand is how you're so confident that consciousness comes later when that's not settled. That hasn't been settled.
I think
that's not. I mean, that's.
I think it's that. I think it's that. Look,
that is the most presumptuous statement, Tim. It's not settled. It's all speculative at this point.
Look, what I mean by consciousness definitely comes later. Now, it may be that I'm using it in the traditional old-fashioned
Yes,
way.
I think you are. And so let's start. Okay, here's a way we could get further in this
etymology.
conversation.
Go for the etymology.
Yeah.
With knowledge, it means you know that you're experiencing this.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm talking about.
No, that's something else.
So we could waste another hour arguing about the word, or we could throw the word out and use words.
What's the word that's there already?
Experience was what I'll use. Experience.
I used to use that in Soul Story. I use experience, and I put a little asterisk by it to go, but I don't mean it conscious experience like we experience it. Just some sort of interaction.
The thing is that, so what you're referring to, which is sometimes also referred to in the literature as metacognition, is a process that has certainly evolved. You know, there's no, I don't think there's any reasonable doubt about that knowing that you know something and being able to focus in the way that human beings can is not something that is just equally distributed throughout the universe with you. What I'm saying is that let's talk about phenomenology. Let's just talk about the qualitative aspect of experiencing something. That does not necessitate the human faculties that we have that are more advanced. I mean, you can have experiences. For example, I would imagine there's something it's like to be a mouse, right? Like Nagel's, what is it like to be a bat? And more than having experiences, you can have directed activity, right?
You can have what, sorry?
Directed activity, right? So you, for example, in a dream, you might not know that you're dreaming or be aware that you're dreaming, but you're active. You know, your goal-directed behavior is occurring. You're responding to your environment with a sense of subjectivity. So what I'm trying to say is that I think my view, and I don't have a corner on truth, it's my view, is that life at a very basic level contains that property, right? So that it's proactive, that it has directed activity. And I think it explains evolution.
I would agree with that.
I think it explains evolution far better than this idea of blind selection. I think blind selection doesn't address.
Sorry, say that again. I missed you.
I think it explains evolution more robustly than just using the idea of blind selection, because, and this is why, I think the mutations that occur are more than just accidental. I think they're creative. The fact that they don't work most of the time in terms of functionality doesn't mean they're not creative. For example, a few years ago, there was a species of cricket in Peruvia, and there was a parasite that was targeting them based on the sounds they were making. So they would hear the sounds and the parasite would get into the cricket. So then one day, one cricket was born who had a mutation. It didn't make any noises. And then 5 years later, 90% of that population didn't make noises. Well, what did that show me? Well, it was a very functional process. I don't think you get that through randomness. I don't like this idea that hard-nosed materialists use, that the universe throws up random stuff, and if it sticks, we just got lucky. So also you could look at Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands. I think that's a functional, intentional, creative process of becoming that is done through more than just, well, there was a random mutation thrown up, and then the natural selection just passed it on, and now that's what you get. I think there's so many examples if you look at the phylogenetic tree of major...
I think you're most likely right.
Right. So what I'm saying to you is that's, to me, I have to look at that and think the universe is moving towards a functional creation where things don't just decay into entropy, but on the contrary, it's moving towards better and better order and better and better complexity.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's doing it blindly, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's doing it.
It depends what you mean by blindly.
Well, blindly in the sense that it's just material interacting and fortuitously.
I think you'd be much more likely to say, look, the relationship, which is the information which is allowing that to happen. You could call it wisdom. You could say the wisdom of the universe is accumulated.
Yeah, but you can't call it wisdom without giving it some subjective property.
Well, if everything is relational,
yeah,
everything is a subject and everything it relates to is an object.
Yeah,
but
I heard that part of your conversation.
But it doesn't mean that it's conscious or it's got psyche or it's got life. It means all the way down there is the constant interaction of the one with itself, and that. Yeah,
but you're not addressing the origins or the teleology of it.
Pardon?
You're not addressing the teleology or the origins of that process. You're just saying it's information relationship, but
where does it come from, you mean?
Yeah, you're not addressing
that. Where is it going? When you say teleology, you mean where it's trying to get to?
I'm talking about origins and where it's going. For example,
so I don't think it knows where it's going. That's why it's creative.
I don't think it knows where it's going, but I think it's driving. I think it's pushing towards more functional, creative complexity.
Again, it's like how far can we pare this down before we don't need those things, like an eros or some evolutionary drive? And I think
I don't think you can.
Well, let me try.
Okay.
If the universe is the if every moment is the realization of potentiality.
Sure.
In a new way. If that's what the universe is. It is being, which is potentiality to be anything in a particular process of becoming, which is the accumulation of information in ever more emergent ways. So it's both creative and repetitive.
I'm with you.
If that's what it is, then it will work out its direction. It does, and if you put it at the beginning, anything you put at the beginning, you've assumed, you haven't explained, and it's kind of arbitrary.
That applies to you too.
But I'm not putting anything at the beginning.
You can't put nothing at the beginning because you can't get something out of nothing.
Yeah, I'm putting the very minimum that I can.
I know, but you still got to put something there. You can't put nothing there.
Of course.
But you got to explain it. You got to have some ontological assumption.
But there's a difference, isn't there, Ryan, between what you put there? If you've got a drive, it's like, well, whose drive or what's drive or where's that come from?
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got, look, it's kind of more like the Tao. Or Kabbalah or Gnosticism. It's like the one becomes two. There's no drive involved. A drive would be already there. If there was a drive,
you're in an accidental universe, and I just can't.
It's nothing accidental.
It just happened. One becomes two.
Look. For any system of thought, the one can't become two, and the reason the one can't become two is because for there to be a one that becomes two, there must already be two.
Okay.
Because there has to be a motive or something else that makes it two.
Okay.
So you can never make the one two. So instead, think about it as I would call it a unidual universe, where being and becoming are the same thing. So actually, it's not like the one becomes two. It's like there is a process, which is the one as two. That's what we've
the
got.
universe in relationship to itself.
Yeah. And
I'm with you there.
So
I'm with
take
you
that
there.
as your basis. Now, there's no drive. There's no all of that.
I'm not with you there.
Hang on, wait. There will be, but there can't be. There can't be.
I don't think
there.
you can get intention from non-intention. I just
What,
don't believe that.
And that's why I don't think.
Two, well,
and where do you get? Where's the drive come from?
I want to go back to. I want to go back to something you've said before, and so you've offered the possibility that this universe came from another universe, and then that universe came from another universe. Am I correct?
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly. So, but presumably, following your logic and your theory of evolution, presumably that universe evolved into some sort of state of intentional conscious experience.
Presumably,
right? So let's say that universe is similar to what's happening in our universe, following your theory, which is that it's evolving into maybe the latest and greatest thing is love. Okay,
I think all of that's possible.
So presumably, it's very possible that universe intentionally created this universe. I mean, so what I'm saying to you is that all you've done is put the explanation further back.
That's what you've done. I haven't done that.
But that's what you've offered as an explanation for the origins.
I'm actually trying to discuss it metaphysically. So if you put in more universes, then you have to keep going back and back and back until you find.
I thought I heard you do that.
No.
Okay, so you're not saying that explains our universe.
I'm saying.
Sorry, I thought I heard you in a podcast say that you think this universe came from another universe.
Oh yeah, no, it could have done. But
you're ambivalent about it at this point.
No. Well, I don't know, but I think probably if you had to push me, I'd say the evidence seems to suggest it did.
Well, right, and that's why I am pushing you, because I'm saying it doesn't. That doesn't explain anything.
It's like, so then you could say, yeah. So if it's doing that, then by the theory of passivity, this universe would be working out the passivity of a previous universe in a new way.
Right, but do you agree with me that it's plausible that universe could have intentionally created this universe?
It could have done. But if you're trying to get to the underlying metaphysics, then you have to ignore that and go,
why?
Because if you're going back and back and back, eventually you're going to come to less and less complex things that haven't repeated before until you get information in its more basic form. So you're still going to have the same problem. You've just
still have the same. Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. We're still going to have the same problem. So
let's forget the possibilities of other universes.
Okay, so let's push it back to the very beginning then.
Let's imagine that this is the first one, even though we don't know.
Well, imagine this is the first one.
Because metaphysically, that's the problem we're trying to discuss.
So, but here's my point to you. It's like if I posit intentional life force at the beginning, let's call it life force, some sort of subjective, qualitative being of some sort, not like a deity, but just some sort of beingness.
And this comes from where? Or this has what?
I'm just let me finish my thought, and then
okay,
you
sorry.
can. Yeah, no,
sorry.
it's okay. Let's just say I explain it in those terms. I don't offer any other ontological priors. I just said there's some sort of intentional life force that is creative, and then it expands and it becomes in relationship with itself, and it goes more and more creative, and that's just what it wants, and that's what that is. So I could posit that at the beginning, or I could do what you're doing and say, well, no, it's just being. There's no intention. It is just being. But what I'm trying to say to you is that whichever one we use, we still have the problem of that we have to make an assumption, right? So
but there's a huge difference, Ryan. So there's a huge. Basically, what you're doing is you're putting God at the beginning, and maybe a pared down version of God, but it's God, and that's the whole. What's there is Brahman or whatever. So
no,
look,
I'm not. I'm really not. I wouldn't use those words.
Okay,
because it makes it sound too anthropocentric.
Okay, it doesn't have to be anthropomorphic God. But there's a something which has intentionality. It wants to go somewhere.
Sure.
It's creative.
Yeah.
It's conscious. It's doing stuff.
Yeah, and not conscious.
Now that's a hell of a lot. Whereas if you could explain the same, the things that I think we both want to explain, which is that the universe has arisen with intentionality, and purpose
That it
and
now
meaning,
has it, you're saying.
and creativity and
Yeah.
consciousness
Yeah.
and psyche, and for me, God. That it has arisen as God.
It's arisen, it's evolving into that from your perspective.
All of those things is what it's become and is becoming.
Right.
And then you're able to do something which seems so seems so elegant to me, which is you don't have to put it mysteriously at the beginning. You can still have the same purpose. You can let the universe start, the creativity of the universe can start as what gets called random, which is creativity. It's just like poof, poof, poof.
But it's not random.
But then is conditioned by passivity increasingly, so that what's happening right now, our creativity that we're sharing, which is fantastic, by the way, is a high level of creativity conditioned by the language we know, the books we've read, the thoughts we've had.
Do you think it started random?
I think I don't see if because I'm not a reductionist.
Right.
I'm an emergentist. When I say, look, the very ground of the universe, I would seem to be let's call it spontaneous.
Okay.
Spontaneous coming into being of potentiality, into the spontaneous becoming.
And why would it be problematic sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, but like
no, you go ahead.
What's his name? Peirce.
Okay.
Charles Sanders Peirce said, he used the word. This is very much his thing, actually. So it's 100 years old, but he used the word tychism. Tyche is Greek for chance. It's like there's a spontaneous creativity, but that creativity will itself is what's becoming ordered.
Yes, but what I want to share with you, sorry, go ahead. I want to let you finish. Go ahead.
No, that's it really. So that by the time it reaches us, that creativity is now highly ordered and conscious.
Conscious, again, we gotta flag the word conscious because we're using it in different ways. So I don't want to get bogged down.
And we know that we're doing it.
Right.
The atoms don't know they're doing it, but we know we're doing it.
That's fine. That's fine. So
let me define.
Please,
say what you're going to say, and then let me define what I think consciousness is.
Okay.
It's really simple.
Okay, I'm going to say something,
and then maybe we can find a word that suits both of us.
These words you're using, spontaneous, creative, they're not. You're right. They're not random words. They're not materialistic words. They're not. You're not explaining it in a reductionistic way. Creative. I mean, just to look at the feel that word for me at least, and I feel that to me that word is very. There's something very. If we're not going to use the word conscious, there's something very experiential and subjective and energetic and imaginative. Well, I could even say imaginative. There's something imaginative. I mean, and so to posit a creative, it's like, well, who's doing the creating? It's like there has to be some sort of force. It just, like, creativity doesn't just happen on its own. There's something driving that creativity and spontaneity.
So I read a very good article by Daniel Dennett, who's not someone I sympathize with in many ways, but he's a smart guy.
Yeah, sure.
And he described the great turnaround that happened in science with Darwin. As he said, it was really hard because it was the first time that human beings could really challenge what seemed the obvious thing, which was if something is intelligent, someone must have done it. With the idea that actually a process actually could create that.
No, but I'm saying the process itself is intelligent.
Yeah, I'm saying the whole universe is becoming intelligent.
I agree, but I think it's becoming intelligent.
And the word creativity, it was coined by A.N. Whitehead. He made the word up to describe exactly this. Now, obviously, we use it different ways now. It's become a very popular word. I avoid it for the very reason that you said. I used it for you, really. Okay. I think it's like, because it slips us into all sort of anthropomorphic feelings. What I'm trying to describe is a bit like, if you imagine the image which I find helpful is, imagine the quantum foam. You know the quantum foam?
No, tell me about it.
So space, we now seem to know, it seems, is not empty. Yeah. It is full of quantum particles coming into and out of being.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, yes, no,
Yeah. Okay, now I'm with you.
That's exactly the process I'm talking about. The lowest level is I exist, I don't exist, I exist, I'm information, I'm not information. And like there's a whole there's infinite potentiality, which is the field, which is nothing, being informed by things which a bit, and that those bits are beginning just through, because they will start to form patterns, and we know that because we can see spontaneous random generators do it. And they form patterns, and then once you've got patterns, that is now plasticity. So it's now conditioning what's going to happen next. So the next random creativity isn't random anymore, because it's creativity, but it's within the pattern. So now order is taking shape, and that order is the intelligence of the universe, which will govern how those relationships. And because every single system is in relationship to all other systems, how it relates to the other systems will depend on what happens next, and that will depend on its complexity, how it can read it. So electrochemical reactions are on a very primitive level, will become these higher level reading of the universe until you reach us, where our ability to read the universe is quite phenomenal. But we're very complex systems. So we've turned into these great super systems, which has allowed that fundamental relationship of electrochemical reading,
the quantum foam,
and all the way through, has turned into these super systems whereby we can be relating to each other on the level of the sensory and the conceptual.
So, I mean, is it fair to say that you're saying, I don't know how that came into being, but that's what I'm starting with?
I'm saying that the simplest I want to get to the simplest thing I can possibly find, because my thesis, which I'm trying to make work, is that everything that has form, so that everything you can distinguish, is part of one process of the emergence of evermore, is the realization of potentiality on ever more emergent levels. So the simplest thing is duality, which is the bit, 1 or 0. That is the same conclusion I think Lao Tzu came to, and the creator of the Kabbalah came to, and all those guys, that we're fundamentally got that movement, and that, so the one as two, I think it is unidual, the one in relationship to itself, and then that from that fundamental source of pure information is going to come everything, and everything is going to be an emergence of that relationship, the ability for it to read itself in ever more emergent ways. And that what you're describing then with like, oh, the plants can learn, it's like, yeah, they really can. And slime molds, and like
exactly.
the whole universe is learning. And then at a certain point, you've got the development where it can read the universe in a new way. And that means you're getting the beginning of what we would call sensation. So it's being able to read light. It's going to be able to read touch. It's going to be able to read the movement of the air. So now that's a whole new thing which hasn't existed. It's an emergence which hasn't existed before. And what I mean by consciousness is simply, and I know that you're using it in a different way, but what I mean is, my theory of consciousness would be, look, once you get life, you get a gender, like you said. It's like there's life and death. So the agenda of every living thing in the evolutionary process is reproduce and survive.
Right.
But at the same time, we've got such complexity of super systems now. You're taking in so much information, and nearly all of that information doesn't matter, but some of it really, really matters, because you can eat it, or it can eat you, or you can fuck it.
Right.
And what's going to develop and be very evolutionarily beneficial is the ability for the system to focus its processing, to focus and process in high definition, if you will.
Yeah.
And then what you're getting, and that's what I've got.
And that's what you call consciousness.
I am conscious of
Yeah.
you. I am not conscious of sitting on the chair. Oh, I am now, because I've paid attention.
No, I know. And
so wherever I put my attention and focus on, I become conscious of that. And the rest I take in a pre-conscious or unconscious.
Yeah. No, I just see it. I define my terms and I look at it much differently. I would look at it as a wave. Like look at like a picture, a two-dimensional wave.
I think you could see it a bit like a wave, yeah.
Picture it like a two-dimensional wave on the chart, and I'll call the wave consciousness.
Okay.
And the tip of that wave is my focused attention, but it's not a stagnant wave, so that something that wasn't at the tip at one point can move in response to the environment. So for example, I'm a snow skier, okay? So when I'm snow skiing, all of that which within me is athletic and dynamic and somatic and involved in being on the mountain is right there at the tip of that wave, engaging with my environment, right? And my environment elicits a response and I bring out a response and I'm there. Now, when I come down that mountain and I take off my boots and I go into the condo and I hug my wife, my environment's changing, my internal field is changing, and the wave is shifting. And then maybe I'm more of a lover. That's why I like subpersonality so much, because it explains so well the dynamic shifts of modes of consciousness that occur. And so that it's not that the rest of the wave is unconscious, it's just that it's dynamic. It's that it's not functional for me to be one stagnant conscious fragment. I have to be fluid. But if those other pieces of me weren't part of my consciousness, they wouldn't be able to emerge and engage in such a fluid way. They would just kind of be stuck in this automatic process. And then I would have I'd have to posit some sort of ego that's managing everything, which I think is just this totally overdone thing in depth psychology. It's totally antiquated now. The consciousness is fluid. Like you just said, survive and fuck. Okay. Well, I mean, we have, like, if we look at our evolutionary history, we have to be able to shift in and out. We have to be able to have a fluidity.
Of course.
So but what I'm saying is that there is, like, the way that depths, like the word not unconscious comes from, well, you could bring it back to like Schopenhauer, but really depth psychology. And the reason they made it up is because they were trying to explain internal contradictions. You know, why do we do one thing and then we do something else? Why do we say this and then we do that?
But that's the unconscious psyche we're talking about now. That's a different thing.
That's what they were. But I'm saying that's where they started the term, was unconscious psyche. And
we haven't even got on psyche, Ryan. We haven't even reached there, have we? That's where
I know,
started.
but I'm saying that the word. I'm saying that the origins of the term.
Well, it's just.
I mean, it matters. It matters where the word comes from to me. And I'm saying,
if you're a sentient being, and you're taking in all this sentient information, what you focus on, you process in high definition. And you experience that.
No issue there. No issue there.
That's all I'm saying.
But I'm saying it's very fluid. So it's not like,
of course.
It's not like, and I think about you talk about.
Look, I'm conscious now of what's behind me.
I know, but it's not an iceberg. It's not like an iceberg. Like, think of an iceberg. An iceberg is this solid block, and it's more or less fixed. And that's not how consciousness works at all. I mean, it's so fluid. It's so dynamic.
So again, I think
anything can happen.
The image, I think this is really interesting, because the iceberg image, which I agree with you, the iceberg image is very much to do with the next thing on, isn't it? Which is the psyche. That's where you get the idea. I think it was Jung used the analogy, didn't he? That consciousness is the bit that you can be conscious.
He used it different than Freud. Yeah, to him, it was more how you're using it. Like,
but I'm not using that at all here. Okay. I'm just saying, I haven't even got to psyche. I'm just talking about consciousness, sensory consciousnness. That's all I'm talking about.
We're going to be in trouble, because then we have to define psyche, and then we might have a whole nother
psyche is where we're trying to head.
I'm just saying
sensory consciousness.
I thought we were in psyche this whole time, Tim.
No, I'm talking about the sensory world. That's all.
But to me, that's part of the psyche. See, that's where we're different.
I think the psyche is the imaginal. It's completely different.
I'm saying like, if you go back to my example of evolution, to me, those functional mutations that do occur, are imaginal. They are imaginative. I mean,
I would say the imaginal hasn't even come anywhere near existing yet. The imaginal is images of the sensory. And just look at your dreams, look at your thoughts. The very process of thinking is taking audio images of talking and imagining doing it to yourself. It's all representations of the sensory world, which has created its own domain. What's happening on the level where you're saying, like with bluefinches and all that. That's all to do with the infoverse, I think. That's to do with the fact that the thing which is throwing up possibilities is itself learning what it wants.
Yeah. So then for you, the psyche,
problem solving.
Then for you, the psyche is the ability to, like this, and this is also a Jungian idea as well, the ability to give image to instinct, the ability to give image to sense.
Image to instinct?
That's how Jung because Jung had, and I'm a great scholar of Jung. I'm not a great scholar. I'm saying I'm a great fan and a scholar. I am a scholar of Jung. I'm doing my Ph.D. in depth psychology.
Well, that's pretty good.
So I know Jung a little bit. Great scholar. I just realized how that sounds. Anyway, so I'm a fantastic scholar.
I love being a scholar of, I heard.
Okay, good. Okay, on one hand, you've got spirit, right? And on the other hand of his spectrum, you've got instinct. And for him, the archetype, the psyche's in the middle, okay? For him, the archetype was the image of the instinct. And so that and on one end, he would have the color red. On the other hand, he would have the ultraviolet. And so the spirit was this way of lifting the instinct up into this realm of imagination and psyche. And that's why the archetypes are both nebulous and somewhat phylogenetic at the same time. They're creative.
Okay,
but they're
so let me
does that make sense, at least what I'm trying to say?
Not really.
No.
But
Okay.
Jung often doesn't make sense. I love him to bits, but he often doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So I'll if I can, I'll try quickly. It's very difficult to do it quickly because I'm not very good at it, to be honest. I haven't worked out how to do it yet. I'll try and say, and then you tell me if it's the same thing, because the image makes the instinct conscious. That line, I love it.
Yeah.
Because it feels like, look, everything is the systems in relationship to each other, electromagnet, electrochemical, blah, blah, and then you're going to get sensory, and then you're going to get sensory, like, which is clearly there in plants in there, they can sense the light, so that's sensuous, and slime molds. But then with the neurosystem, you're going to get this level of being able to process in this complex way, which allows focus. So now you're getting the emergence of a new level, red and sound and all these things that haven't existed before.
Right.
So the relationship sitting a new level. Then what I think is happening is that ability of the system to choose to focus and like you said, it's fluid. It's moving around all the time.
Yeah.
Where does it need to go? What's the most important thing for me to process? Like right now, it's you.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving you all my attention and processing, because it's hard to process you. The next step will be, when the system starts to process its own processing.
Yeah.
So now it's been, the passivity has been running how it does that the whole time in a creative way. And at a certain point is able to actually see it's actually able to process its own processing in high definition, so that you're getting, everything's obviously, look, if slime molds can learn, then they have a relationship with the past.
Yes.
But then you're getting a conscious memory. That will arise in just as with the development of the eye, the relationship between a system and a rose is going to become red. With the emergence of the ability to process its own processing, the past is going to emerge as an image of the past. So the rose you saw as red is now an image of a rose. That's a whole new thing.
Mm-hmm.
This has never existed, just like the redness of the rose was a whole new thing. You've now got images, and once you get we've been sending information to each other with verbal signals forever and developing language, and once that becomes, you have an audio representation, you are developing the ability to process the processing. And once you do that, it's going to just exponentially explode into this whole ecology of the imagination.
Yeah.
What I call the imaginals. So that's how I would see it. And then what you're conscious of within it depends on what you're able to focus on.
Are you familiar with Ian McGilchrist's distinction between presentation and representation?
I have talked to him about it, but you're going to have to remind me.
Well, just insofar as I can understand it, I'm sure I don't understand it in great detail, but I like what he says, which is that representation is this idea that you kind of have to extrapolate something from an experience and then model it in order for the experience to be what it is, right? Presentation is more of a, it's just how it occurs to me. This is what's presenting itself. It's more of an instantaneous perceptual response. I think the ideas you're presenting, first of all, I think the ideas that you're presenting about the complexity of how we perceive and how we are conscious evolving, I think that you're on target with it from my perspective. I think that makes sense. What I'm trying to say is I just think that there's a dynamicism to sensation that is psychic, meaning psyche oriented, that is directed. It does have a sense of experience. It's not like this idea that we need to metacognitively re-represent. I mean,
I don't think that at all. I don't think we have to re-represent anything. I hate that.
Okay, got it.
That whole idea of qualia between me and the world.
Okay, so you're not saying that.
Not in the slightest.
Oh, okay,
I'm saying everything is real. I hate that. Okay. I'm saying that the when I look at the rose,
yeah,
I am seeing the rose.
Right.
And the experience of red is the meeting of me and the rose. The meeting of the snail in the rose will be quite different, but the meeting of me and the rose is going to be that. Yes. And I'm not re-representing it, but if I want to think about the rose or remember the rose or imagine the rose in the future, I'm now manipulating images. And images don't have the passivity of the physical systems. So I can do anything with them as we're doing now.
Yeah.
And you can have ideas about ideas about ideas, and the ideational network is going to just become vast.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. And the ideas themselves are giving, the words are giving you access to the very thing with which you're perceiving. And then the other thing which might be relevant here is because I do think that by the time once the psyche arrives, that we do not sense the world only. I think we sense the world.
Meaning
that we are psychobiological organisms and that we process the world with ideas. They're not add-on extras.
And we have motivations and preferences.
Well, everything. But even on the most basic level, the complexity of catching my keys.
Yeah.
There's such a lot of information about narrative, time.
Yeah.
It's like there's the ideational network involved unconsciously. Not consciously doing any of it.
Yeah.
In fact, it would be very hard for me to work out consciously how I did do it.
Yeah, but see, there's unconscious makes it seem like. So, for example,
let's say non-consciously.
The brain has to interpret virtually everything. I mean, there's only a few reflexes that are, for example, like the knee. But for you to feel pain, signals have to. For example, if you get stabbed in the calf, signals have to come up to the brain. The brain has to then interpret those signals and say pain. So I mean, yeah, sure, we could. So we could speculate. Exactly we could speculate, and we could say, well, that's non-consciousness, or and again, let's not. I don't even want to use the word conscious, because what I'm trying to say is that.
I'm just saying I don't know. I didn't follow any of that. I followed what you're saying.
Right.
I'm saying that I was conscious of when I was conscious of the pain.
I understand, but when
I wasn't conscious of, it's in my nerve right now, and now it's coming up here. Now I'm processing it, and now it's going out.
No, I know, but when you say the word "I," you're privileging that perspective over. Well, the brain's doing something too. Does that make sense?
I'm a whole system. I'm a psychobiological system, and that system focuses and pays attention to the output of the system. So the system goes, pain, danger, and I go, pay that attention, action.
Sure. Or you say, for example, I live next to a busy road and there's cars going by all the time. So when I first moved here, I was very sensitive to the noise, and then eventually my sensory system said, not important. I don't need to pay attention. So I understand, but what I'm trying to say is just in the use, when we get to the point of saying, when I throw the key and I catch the key, it's just happening, and I'm not doing these minute computations, they're just happening.
The system is doing them.
I agree, the system's doing them, but I'm not consciously doing these. You're saying I'm not aware.
I'm not conscious of them.
I'm not aware of what my nerves are doing.
No, I'm not.
That's what you're saying, and I'm saying
yeah.
what I'm trying to say is that yes, and the nerves are doing things, and they're doing it not at just the level of automatic. They're doing it at the level of dynamic, which is to say that they're interpreting, they're sensing. For example, a recent article came out that neurons actually make decisions. They evaluate information and they decide what to do with it.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is, when I say the word consciousness, that applies to those dynamics.
Okay, and I think you're losing the word consciousness when you do that. That's all.
I think
you
need
you've
got a horrible word for.
So you just need to come up with a new word for what you mean by consciousness. Because otherwise you can't make the differentiation of going, I am conscious of the pain, but not of what the nerve cells are doing, which is obviously true. So if you want to be able to say that,
I like implicit and explicit, because implicit information, things go like, okay, in the field of phenomenology, Husserl had the idea of sedimentary experience, which is that we carry with us this whole past of experience that then informs the way that we respond in the present moment implicitly, that it's sedimented. Now, he wasn't saying it biologically, but I'd like to apply it to how we process.
Sounds quite similar to the passivity idea, actually.
Exactly. And then, Merleau-Ponty came along and he created this idea of the lived body. And that whether we acquire it through learned habit or whether we acquire it through inheritance, that there's this implicit framework of learning, responding, orienting with our environment, proactively engaging with our environment. And that, to me, that word implicit is more suitable than non-conscious or unconscious, because it's when we say the word non-conscious, no matter how much we try, we give it connotations of automata, and we give it connotations of automatic, and we give it connotations of non-subjective and non-experiential. And I'm saying that I don't believe those things. I think it was actually more accurate to say that all those things do exist within that sedimentary structure.
Is it? Yeah. I mean, you still haven't got a word. You still need a word, Ryan, because there's you're going to lose some really important differentiations if you use it in such a wide way.
Well, I'd argue that on the other side, that we lose really important differentiations by saying that there is a non-conscious.
But I agree with you, and I'm able to make those discriminations, and I completely agree with you.
Okay.
And I see what you're calling automata. I see that as these are passivity systems which are growing to ever more complex.
Right.
And it's a spectrum. And at a certain point, we call it life, because it has different qualities.
Yeah.
And then it's clearly not automatic in that way.
Right.
But it's kind of basic, and still, basic life does perform in repetitive ways which can be predicted, most often. But as it becomes more and more emergent, that becomes impossible to predict, so that anyone watching our conversation would not be able to predict what you're going to say next.
Sure, I'm with you. You can't.
But on lower levels we can predict, because it becomes, the passivity stronger and the potentiality for creativity is less.
Yeah, Stuart Kaufman, a theoretical biologist, says that the universe it's non-prestatable above the level of atoms. It's non-ergodic. It doesn't visit every possible state. So we don't know what it's literally spontaneously emerging. It's not predictable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right.
And that's what I meant earlier when I said with an algorithm, it is prestatable to the degree that you can predict it with much more control than you could predict an organism. For example, you can set the conditions of that algorithm in a way that doesn't apply to life. That's what I'm saying.
But it doesn't have to be determined. If at the bottom of the system is something unpredictable, and the whole theory that I'm trying to share with you is that everything is the conditioning of the pure potentiality, which is completely unpredictable. It's unconditioned, which is then conditioned through the accumulation of evolution. Well, that unconditionedness is there the whole way through. It's there right now. Everything is in it, which is why the future is conditioned and isn't conditioned. It will be,
because there's passivity.
It will always be
right.
actually something which has never happened before. All the relationships, all the ways that the systems interrelate will be new, and there'll be more information, and that means the next one will be new. But what's happening is that the levels and the way in which the systems are reading each other and operating and processing each other is increasing exponentially. And when it hits the level of the psyche, that's another huge jump, like the level, like happened with life.
Yeah.
And then you can differentiate between things I'm aware of and things which are happening lower down in the system, which feed into.
You can differentiate those without using non-consciousness. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's use the word awareness. Aware of.
I like that much better. Yeah.
Okay, all right, we can do that. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, because
I'm aware of.
Right.
So that ability to be aware of is where I'm focusing, going, that is what I want to, and of course I can't focus it anywhere. You know, I can focus it in the world depending on the nature of my senses, and I can focus it in the psyche depending on the way that my psyche is organized. So
right, but you would like, just to be clear, you don't give a psyche to a slime mold or to a plant.
No, because I think you can't have the psyche until you've got conscious. You know, you can't until there's eyes.
Until there's a narrative identity.
I think that's quite complex, actually. The narrative identity. I think that's going to come.
So a dog
later.
then could have.
Pardon?
Then a dog might.
Psyche, well, yeah, clearly, because it can dream.
Okay, I just want to know where you draw that.
I have no idea where the line gets drawn.
In the animal kingdom,
but I think what you can see in the animal kingdom is that they are able to create images from their sensory experience.
Okay.
And one of the clear ways you can see that, like a parrot can dream. Well, if they're dreaming, then they're experiencing something which is not sensory, but which is using sensory experience to create an internal, a psychic experience.
Right, and that it's sort of a whole-on building on another.
No, I don't think it's holonic.
Oh, okay.
I think it's key.
Okay.
I don't think the psyche is. I think the psyche is not a holonic thing, because holons contain lesser subsystems.
And the psyche is its own thing. You're saying?
No, I'm saying. So it looks to me like the psyche has arisen as an extension of the psychobiological system. So
no doubt,
it's arisen as that, and it's one system.
Right.
I do think, and this fits very much with your theory of the intentionality of the evolutionary process.
Yeah.
I do think it is possible for the psyche to exist then without the biology.
Okay.
And I think that's actually the fruition of this intention, which is there right from the start of life, to not die. And I think
then that's what I would call an energy field.
Okay.
Well, I would say it becomes its own sort of.
It's able to exist as a passivity system.
Now, I don't know if that applies in this human flesh, or if it's beyond that, or I don't know how those nuances work, but I do suspect there's something to what you're saying.
So the way that I try and think about it is to go, that I'm a psychobiological system.
Yep.
The system can function in a cut down way. I could cut off my arms and legs.
Sure. And
if it was done in an appropriate way, I might be able to carry on as a psychobiological system. What happens if I cut out all of the biology? Now, if the psyche is reliant on the biology in some way, which is the common idea, it's encoded in the brain or something, then obviously not. But if that's not the way it is, if the psyche is part of a passivity system, which is in the Infoverse, and that's what it is, it's a super system which is part of the psychobiological system, organizing cells, for instance, but it's organizing ideas.
Yeah.
Then once it's arrived at enough sophistication, then can that passivity system carry on? Which for you and me means when the experience of sensation ceases, does the experience of imagination continue?
Right. Okay. So then, going back to biology, obviously you've made a distinction between humans having complex psychic functions versus, say, a slime mold or further up the evolutionary tree. So then, if it's not dependent on the biology, then why do you make the distinctions between different animals?
If it's not,
if it's not dependent, if the psyche is not dependent on the biology,
I'm saying the psyche is evolved from the biology.
But then it's detaches in some sense.
Then I think it evolves to a level of complexity that it is able to function, because it is the part of the passivity system which organizes imaginal information. The biological system is the part of the passivity system that organizes cells, biological information.
Sure.
And that is holonic with the cells that it contains. And if they don't function, it doesn't function. But the psyche is a different level of information. It's imaginal information. And that's why I think we enter the domain which spirituality has always been exploring, the duat, the bardos, the whatever you want to call them, which is a whole imaginal dimension of reality, which has emerged as an ecology of psyche. So for me, this isn't what we're doing right now is not just a bubble of psyche on my head and a bubble of yours. We're actually in a domain in which we are passing information around to each other. And
when you look, sorry, go ahead.
And the reason we can feel so close, which I certainly do to you, even though you're on another continent, is not just because I'm looking at your picture on a screen. It's because that domain is non-spatial, and it's all to do with narrative proximity. And right now, and generally, I feel you close. That's my connection with you. Like my connection with my daughter, who's in another country right now, is right there with me. Because it's a narrative proximity, not a spatial one.
I think I want to push this idea further and see where we both are. But I want to say first that I feel that this idea that the psyche is just materialistic and it all just can be boiled down to the brain. I think that's nonsense.
Yep.
Because there's so much more to just the way we experience life that doesn't quite get captured by looking at it from a reductionistic perspective. And I'm of the opinion that the biological substrate provides a lot of what is in my personality. For example, my preferences, my dispositional tendencies. And we have a lot of research that supports the fact that the differences between individuals can be largely explained through genetics. About 50% of the differences between people, and those are studies that have been done over 40 years now, highly replicable studies. So for me, I could imagine that something that I would call my soul, let's call it my soul, has a life force that it will go on to some extent. Like if I die, that life force has its own essence, that it's not just dependent on this body. However, I don't think I'm going to have the same personality. So I don't think it's like, I love chocolate cake and I love water skiing. And, I don't think any of that stuff's going to apply to a non-biological entity, because I think that those organismic processes provide content and structure to consciousness.
All right, try this.
Yep.
See, what you're saying is very familiar to me, because I think it's quite a common. I don't mean it's a view I would have had.
Right.
It's quite a common view in spirituality. So I mean, and I know what it's trying to do for that reason. But what about this? What about if your identity is your past? Everything is. Everything's a process. You're a process. Your identity is your past. Past isn't going anywhere. So all of the things you mentioned, they're you. And they're in your past. Now, they may not be in your present. It's like I'm an old man now, and a lot of things which were in my past are not in my present. I can't take alcohol anymore.
Right.
Okay. I used to be a bit of a wild person, and I'm not anymore.
Right.
But it's still in me because it's my past.
Okay.
Now, my sense is, look, then what we're talking about, if we're a psychobiological system, and then the biology is having a big effect, like you said, and the psyche is also
Yeah.
having a massive effect, actually,
Yeah.
and that they relate, but they're not the same. They're different levels of information, and that it is possible that you could drop the biological information and then you'll lose touch with the biological world, but you will still exist in the ecology of the soul,
Yep.
of the
Yep.
psyche. Then what are you? Well, you're all of your past. What goes with you? Everything goes with you, because it can't not, because you're your past. Will it be you won't be in the biological world,
Yep.
but everything that is informed your experience is now part of you. And the stuff that you can access with your psyche, it means that you will be in a creative process with, no, I'll leave it at that. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think we have to imagine a little bloppy thing which is different, which is separate, because if you go, look, everything is information, everything is a field of being evolving as ever more rich information.
Yeah.
It's like, once you reach that level, that's what you are, and that's gonna reach into and govern your post-life experience.
So there's some way that information stays stored within the identity that is
okay. So this
me.
is this is the idea that I find very hard to get across to people, and it's my fault, and I found it hard to get across to you, even though I spent about 10 minutes trying. So I'm not optimistic, but let me try again. It's not presentism. The information is not in anything. It's the other way around. The past,
we're in the information.
Where is the if the past is expanding and governing everything, where is it? What's it encoded in?
Yeah.
Well, it's encoded in the field of being. And so when you go into a post-life experience, it's still encoded in the field of being. The same place it was always encoded. So it's the infogenetic tree continuing.
So obviously there's differentiation within this code of being.
It is differentiation. All information is simply a word for differentiation. Yeah,
I'll have to say that I gotta admit, that's a tough one for me to understand what you mean by that. The way that just the idea that we're encoded in the information is not encoded in us. I would see that as going both ways, like that, to go with your relational point, that the relationship and the energy is going, the information is always going multiple directions, that it's coming to me and I'm going out.
You are responding to the information around you, and so that's changing you all the time, and it's becoming part of your passivity.
Yeah.
And that's in the present is where emergence is happening.
Okay.
And it's where the relationship is creative. But everything which is forming the infoverse is all the times that happened before.
I guess what I'm trying to say is there some sort of info avatar that's Ryan that is holding, I'm still stuck on how
so
the information. I'm still stuck on the information and how
anything which
coheres.
Forms a system, an individual system, is a relatively autonomous, self-ruling system, and that's something which obviously we deal with. Other theories have to deal with as well. You know, what makes a pile of things different to an integrated system like you, me, or a tree, or indeed an atom or a molecule.
Yeah.
So those individual systems are evolving in relationship with other individual systems. They're all part of the one thing, but they're all in, and that system. Think about the expanding block. It's not. I don't see it quite like this, but it's enough. Or the growing infogenetic tree. It's like it's expanding all the time with more and more information, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So that you are. So the habits or the algorithms or whatever metaphor works, because they all got a different flavor. That you like kind of anthropomorphic ones. So let's go for habits. The habits that the universe has set up, that your great-grandparents set up, are having some effect on you.
Sure.
Because you've come from that, your biology has come from that past.
I would just call that genetics.
Well, yeah, but this is a way of understanding what genetics is.
Okay.
Like, and it's also about expanding. It's like, I think there's a lot of hype around genetics as well. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing, but I don't know. Me, my mum, and my daughter all sleep with one leg out the bed.
Yeah.
The idea that there's a gene for that just seems a bit.
Well, that's not how it works. So if you look at the literature, there's no single gene for a trait. I mean,
No,
it's
no, no.
very
I don't mean.
polygenic.
I don't literally mean there's a gene for that. I mean that is genetically conditioned. Maybe it will turn out that it is.
Well,
But
the way,
even if it is, what I'm trying to say is that is referencing the same level of the system of passivity, which
yeah,
is actually governing everything way before
you're
genes.
you're talking about a meta
What a gene
system
is.
that goes beyond those organismic processes, and I understand it's this is universal. You're talking about a universal theory that
Everything.
applies to all information. I get that, but I
Everything.
want to address what you said about genetics first,
Okay.
because this is a common thing that I find that I think people aren't understanding. The the whole thing has been set up as a dichotomy. So is it nature or is it nurture? And it's still, people still carry that around. It's clear that the genetics don't operate on an island. I mean, that's just obvious. And there's no way in hell that they would have any meaning outside of a context. And I think that the people doing this research really understand that it's contextual. It's like those genes. I hate that word, but
Why?
yes.
Why
Well,
do you hate the word?
I don't like the word because the way it gets used by, like, it's been taken and turned into this self-help
Right. Okay.
thing where it's like, become anything you want, become a superhuman, use your epigenome, and also if like there's like 5 or 6 different meanings for the word epigenetics in the literature.
That's
So
unfortunately true with all of
yeah,
these things.
right. So
Like the word emergence.
but I'm not. It's not a wrong word or anything. I'm just saying I don't like the connotations.
The thing I was
But
saying about, so go on. Sorry.
no, I just wanted to finish what I was saying, which is that
Yeah, please.
yes, clearly it's epigenetics. Yes, that meaning phenotypic expression. That it. I mean, obviously. So, for example, if you come in with a polygenic cluster that has a probabilistic predisposition towards a certain mode of expression or another. So let's say I come in with a cluster that makes me more prone to negative emotions, which is a personality trait, and then I get abused. All that will happen in that circumstance is that unless some other cluster gets involved, that I could interpret my scenario through more and more neuroticism, and I could continue to reinforce that trait because I've engaged it in my experience. I have the proclivity. Same thing would apply to alcoholism or athleticism or eating a lot of food or being particularly extroverted. All it means is that whatever I meet in my environment, I don't meet it as a blank slate. I meet it with a certain set of tendencies, and it's not deterministic, it's probabilistic, and you can't pre-state the outcome. And however I interact with that environment is going to be a both and, not an either or. There's going to be, but there's no such thing as passive influence, which is an old, Skinnerian and behavioral idea that basically says, if you put them in the right environment, then you've got the whole thing set. What did was Skinner or another one who said, give me any child and I'll show you a concert pianist. That's BS. I mean, there's clearly something about the genome that predisposes us to one outcome or another, but the outcome is not fixed. So I just wanted to clarify that because it's one of my pet peeves.
I agree with all of that,
okay.
Ryan, and I think you explained it beautifully as well. My point was more like I'm not qualified to go into this, but if you're interested, I'd check it out.
Yeah.
Was Sheldrake's point, because Sheldrake, this is really where the whole morphic resonance idea came from.
Right.
Was him working with plant genetics.
Right.
And going, the idea of genetics is not enough. And that's where he came up with the morphic fields and the forming fields. Well,
right.
My infogenetic tree is his morphic fields by a different name in a slightly different context. So it's like there is an awful lot of the passivity, ideas, all of this. Sheldrake cannot be underestimated. I mean, just what a this is Sheldrake. I am reformulating and reworking in a different context ideas that Sheldrake in turn took from Charles Sanders Peirce and developed massively, which is that this idea that and like I said, people like Lee Smolin are working on in a context of physics that he calls it the power of precedence, which is, you know, a bit like in law, the laws of nature are more like common laws. Once it's been set down one way, it will tend to repeat. So genetics become part of something bigger than itself, and not as you said, not a deterministic biological system, but actually part of an ongoing creative system in which everything is the past coming into new relationships.
Well, and I think that's evolution.
That's
evolution.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like genetics aren't fixed in concrete. I mean, time scale is all relative. What's a long time to us in terms of nature? It's like, well, it's no biggie.
So if I talk about it like the morphic fields, which you're probably familiar with,
vaguely, yeah,
and Sheldrake's lovely phrase, the presence of the past, which enables you to put it in the present a bit, although it is the past.
Yeah.
Does that help you see what I'm getting at by going, well, everything is the outplay of what I'm calling the infoverse of the infogenetic tree?
The only issue I've had with anything you've said, I mean, I think my estimation, for whatever it's worth, your idea of relationship and complexity, I think that's brilliant. The idea of more and more complexity evolving, the idea of the imagination getting more sophisticated. I can go with you on all of that, and I think it's well founded. I just think that there's more intentionality further back than you've put it, and I think that's it. I mean, really, I think that's our only major disagreement.
Let me say in relationship to that, then,
that
I think everything that we have, we have intentionality.
Yeah.
Clearly, everything that we have comes from something before it, comes from something before it, comes from something before it, in which you can literally trace it right the way back until you reach eventually the one as two. And so the one as two will become intentionality. At what point can you say it's appropriate to use the word intentionality? It's going to be arbitrary.
And I don't think it's intentional see, that's why I don't like the word God, because, you know, like in a theological sense, it's like this deity who has everything figured out, and it's all mapped out, and it's all settled, and it's omniscient and omnipotent and blah, blah, blah. I mean, but I don't see the universe that way at all. I mean, I look at the whole thing as a process of becoming. I'm following my mentor, Dr. Strachan. I've thought about this a lot. I've pushed this idea as far as I can so far, that the universe strives for intelligent and intentional functionality. It resonates with me because first, that means it doesn't always get it. It strives for it. And striving, first of all, it strives for it means it has some basic primitive ontological desire, at least. I mean, and if we find a better term for that doesn't have human.
Let me just be rude and just pop in, because this might be the way of joining it together.
Yeah.
So the metaphysical claim I started with, this is the realization of potentiality in ever more emergent ways.
Yeah, I like that.
That goes, look, what will become the purpose that we're experiencing, and maybe before us as well, is inbuilt into the very metaphysics of the universe.
I'm with that I
because
can agree with.
It's not like it has an intention. It's that it is the realization of potentiality. That's what it is.
Yes.
And because the past accumulates, it is inevitably in more emergent ways.
Right.
So that within the metaphysics is the beginning, and that's very simple, is going to end up, certainly by the time you get to life, definitely by the time you get to psyche, with high level, that basic metaphysics will have become intention and purpose and striving and longing and everything. All of that will be a very, very emergent realization of what was right there. Like every relationship will be an emergent level of the relationship that's there. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I certainly think that from the perspective of where we are now as human psyches, that we've developed this capacity to have subjective experience of intentionality in such a way that you've described. What I'm saying is that I think from the beginning, if there can be said to be any such thing as a beginning, that there's a striving, globally speaking, not specifically, but globally speaking, that says, I'm going for, as a whole, as a universe, intentional, which means I'm going for an intentional state, which means I'm trying to put myself in a position as a universe where I'm striving for intentional and intelligent and functional systems. And I think that explains the direction of evolution and the mutations that occur that then end up sticking and moving forward and onward. And then it also, in terms of your more global information theory, could be compatible with that. But see, the problem that you and I are running into is that if I use the word consciousness or intentional or experiential or driving force, or if I use the word soul, like the universe has a soul, then we get into a situation where you're saying that came later and I'm saying that came first.
Well, fundamentally, it's like, look, these are ideas. What you're expressing is a modern version of some very, very well-established ideas.
Yeah.
And ones that I would have had, for sure, most of my life.
Yeah.
The reason I'm not interested in them now is the possibility of being able to follow through an idea which seems to me so elegant.
Yeah.
Which is, this is the realization of potentiality in ever more emergent ways. So that you haven't got all of that. You're going, that will arise in different forms as it goes through. So you're going, anything that has form, which can be discriminated, is part of one process. It's not there before the process. Everything is part of the process because it's one process. And so all of those things will gather momentum from the simple essence, which is the realization of another potential, based on the building up of information. So from the simplest thing you can get to, which is the one in relationship to itself, duality, yin yang, is going to come everything. And you don't, and so is it possible that we can frame a narrative in which that everything can be part of one story? And if you put it there before, it's not. Then you've undone that.
How come?
Now because you haven't said it's part of the how is it part of the one story?
Well, it's all one. It's monistic. I don't think it's a dualistic or universe.
No. But if you've got, what I'm trying to play with is the realization of potentiality in ever more emergent ways. Well,
sure.
So what's you're introducing all sorts of very complex.
No, I'm not saying that it's all.
Got a drive. It's got an intention. It wants to get somewhere. These are all anthropomorphic qualities.
Well, I think we have to use language that
I'm with you.
I can't say the language of the universe, so okay, I'm using a language that I know.
I'm not accusing you of like taking, of just creating a big man at the beginning. I don't mean to insinuate that. Good. Yeah. And I know these problems because the vision you're trying to articulate to me, is the vision I was trying to articulate in Soul Story and before. It's very similar. Not Soul Story, Mystery Experience.
Okay.
And before. So and I wrestled with exactly the same thing of like, well, I've got these. It's like the thing which turned into intentionality was there at the beginning, for instance. Or that.
Yes. Well, I would say it's life force. It's soul.
So now I want to push it a lot harder and go. Okay. No, let's just go. Let's see if we can actually go for. There is the one in relationship to itself. And that is the discrimination we start with, like yin and yang, like Kabbalah, like all of that. And then from that is going to come all of these things which are definitely in the universe now. And it will develop a direction. But to begin with, it's completely creative. It's going to find its direction.
I think it will develop many directions. And I think it
will.
I think it does find, exactly. It doesn't know its future.
No.
That's what I don't think it knows what it's getting. I think
so
I think all I'm
having...
saying is it's dry. So I'll make it even more anthropomorphic just to put myself further in the corner you've painted me in. Okay. I'm a becoming process. I'm an intentional becoming process as Ryan Holsapple. I have intentions, designs. I'm striving for different. I don't know what I'm going to get. I mean, so I don't see why could the universe not be similar. The universe doesn't know what it's going to get. It's striving for more functionality. That's it. Functionality. I don't think it's striving for love. I don't think it's striving. Now it might be at this stage of evolution, but I don't think it started out with any of those complex psychic ideas that we've inherited in our human culture.
So I think the only difference is I just feel like it's a kind of, it doesn't really work to call it striving. That it's just that what's happening is the realization
then we're
of
back to accidental,
very simple
random
potentials.
But
that's
then it makes it seem,
it's like when those subatomic, when quantum particles are coming into and out of existence, are they striving to come into and out of existence?
I don't know.
Well, is there any reason to think they are? Because if there's not, then we should say,
is there any reason
unless
to
there's
say
a good
no?
reason to say it, then we should not say it.
But the thing is that with the idea of the random universe, which is not what you've said, you've used different language, but just if it's not intentional and it's just there and it just is the one in the relationship, and then something happened and it was this moment of extreme serendipity, we'll call it. All you've done.
I'm not saying it's extreme serendipity.
I'm using my words. So yeah, please correct me. Please correct me if I'm.
What I'm trying to say is, look, the at this end of the universe,
yes,
the thing we call conscious creativity that you and I are doing right now with ideas, starts the same thing that will go starts as what you could call what Peirce called Tychism, which you could call random because it's unconditioned.
Yes, I don't think it could be random.
It's not. Forget the word random then. Call it unconditioned.
Okay.
Unconditioned creativity. This is creative, but this is conditioned creativity. We're using certain words. It's not anything. It's like it's conditioned by who we are, our past, our understanding.
Yeah.
This is unconditioned creativity. So what's happening with the quantum particles coming into and out of existence is unconditioned creativity. It's just like a movement in the fabric of being.
Yeah.
And then not going anywhere. And then, but some of those movements in the fabrics of being do go somewhere. And then they start setting up patterns.
Yeah.
And then you've got and then you've got passivity. And so something which starts as just pure creativity without any direction or knowledge is going to become this.
Yes. I'm gonna ask you a really tough question that's probably not answerable. How did it start? How did that come in? How did that
I could tell you my best way of dealing with it.
Okay.
So this is really tough, I know.
Yeah.
For anyone, but I can get this is the best I can get. If you and I'm going to use the quantum phone image. It's only an image. I'm not saying I think this is way before the quantum phone.
Okay.
The quantum phone is a later represent, but let's use that image.
Okay.
Because we have it, that we know that it's happening in empty nothingness. Something is coming in and out of existence all the time. So let us imagine something, an atemporal field of being within which things are coming into, movements are happening. And that every single one of those movements is the beginning. Because every single one of those movements is a time stream.
Okay.
And that some of them will continue into whole universes. And others won't, like we see in the quantum phone.
So it's a multiverse from the beginning?
Except, and this is the key bit, and it's difficult to get, but if you get it, it's kind of pretty. And this is crazy speculation.
Yeah.
Except because each movement in the field of being, which is the context, the nothing, the potentiality.
Yeah.
Every single movement is the beginning of a time stream. So those movements have no temporal relationship with each other whatsoever. So you can't say one happened before the other or after the other, or indeed at the same time as the other,
Okay.
because each one is the process of time. So what you have then is the beginning of this universe, or maybe this whole stream of universes, which is what we're in. And you have other potentialities, but you have no way of saying they're before or after. So there's a beginning to our universe or our stream of universes, but there's no beginning.
When you say stream, do you mean there's a convergence of universes that makes one
No,
universe?
I'm referring back to your idea that you picked up from.
Oh, okay, got it.
That one universe may lead to another universe.
Got it.
But which, by the way, may mean that a lot of the things that you're saying are true of this universe.
Okay.
Because
that's what that was the point I was making to you.
And when you did it, I was like, yeah. But if we're looking at the metaphysics,
right,
which is like, but let's go back before that. It's like, if we look at the metaphysics of biology and we go, well, you were born with the genetics of your parents. That's like really interesting, and it's conditioned you. But it's like, well, where did they come from? And then you go back and back until you're, well, where the fucking first genetics come from then?
Yeah.
And that's the question.
Right.
Okay, your genetic, you may be repeating what various Holsapples have done for centuries.
Sure.
But what, when did the first Holsapple? And so I'm doing that. I'm saying, okay,
I understand.
So the universe, it may be the universe is repeating what universes do, but how did it arrive there? It arrived there from a more primitive situation, which is the realization of potentiality. And that's when you get this one narrative, which is everything which is capable of being discriminated, everything which is information is arriving from the simplest source. And
I understand. I want to make sure I want to make sure I really hear you. I want to make sure I really hear you, because I think what you're trying to do, gathering from this conversation and your conversation with Kastrup and other places I've been listening, you're trying to apply Occam's razor to come up with the simplest starting point.
Yes.
Now, in my understanding, what you're saying is, of course, we have to make an assumption, but we might as well make the most elegant and simple assumption we possibly can.
Yes, and can we make an assumption we simply cannot doubt, like the one is
there
true.
Is being or something like that.
Yeah, there is being, and it's in relationship.
Right. And so you're using the philosophical tool of parsimony and then building complexity and emergence from there.
But I'm doing that not just simply because I want to make it simple, although I do, but also because it enables there to be one. It enables me to explore this possibility of one guiding principle that can bring together all of the evolutionary process, so that everything is evolutionary. The laws of nature are evolutionary. The bringing in of intentionality is evolutionary. Sure. Everything is evolutionary.
So when you say evolutionary, you mean it comes from simple to complex information?
Yeah, that it starts with the simplest information and becomes richer.
Got it. So I hear you, and I get what I'm not saying I get all the complexities of what you're saying in terms of the physics and the quantum physics, but I understand the theory as a whole. What I'm saying is that, let us say we start with the idea of functionality and the idea that, because what you're getting is functionality. What you're getting is more and more functional systems. And what do I mean by functional? What I mean by functional is in the context in which they perform behaviors, activities, processes, they are stable and robust, and it's not just this big entropic soup. There's a functional process happening in the universe. Yep. What I'm saying is we start with the idea that functionality is actually a driving force of the universe. I'm saying that explains it also, that especially in terms of, and I love using biological evolution as an example, because there you can really see how all these adaptations emerge and how they can, like, let's take the the SARS-CoV-2 virus. That thing is trying to get so damn functional. I mean, and not good for Tim, but in terms of the virus, I mean, he's enjoying his time in your body, okay? And so the virus is trying to get more functional. It's mutating. It's trying to get more and more adaptive. How can I stay around? How can I replicate? And it's doing pretty damn well. It's only humans. To us, it's a tragedy, but to the virus, it's a field day. So the same thing applies. We've got bark beetles here in Colorado, and they just come through the forest and they'll just eat the pine trees alive. And it's horrible if you're a lover of trees and nature. What Dr. Strachan pointed out to me, the bark beetles are just having lunch. And so the point is that whatever the universe is creating, from the perspectivism of that particular thing or process that is doing what it does, there's a process of functionality occurring.
Okay, so take that right, because I think that's right. But take that right back to your metaphysical beginnings, Ryan. And I don't see why that's there. How that's there, what it is, what's its nature,
I think it's life force. I think it's
what's that mean?
Soul. I think it's
what does that mean?
I think soul is that being that you start with.
So being is no longer just being.
No, I'm just using a word that I would say that you could interchange those two words.
Well, yeah, but the difference between the words is my being just is being. That's it. It's just being. That's why it's so simple. You're now using a different.
Well, the thing is that there has to be some sort of activity. There has to be some sort of activity that occurs in order for anything to emerge. So wherever you start, you have to have some activity. Yeah, if it's stagnant, then you don't get anywhere. It's like that old question: how do you get something out of nothing?
That's why I'm saying it is always the activity. Its nature is not being that one day becomes.
Right.
The nature of reality is unidual.
Is becoming.
It is always the becoming.
Sure.
It's the one in relationship to itself. Our universe, or our generic strand of universes, has a beginning, but actually the nature of what existence is always the becoming.
So there is no beginning and there is no end.
There's a beginning. There's a beginning to our universe.
It's concentric, not
and
linear.
There will be an end. But the thing, what it is
at the metaphysics level that you want to talk about,
is always the becoming.
Is it like Nietzsche's time is a flat circle? That it's just this. Not that I'm not talking about in terms of everything repeats, but it's this concentric process that time only applies from the perspective of a relative being, not from the perspective of the universe. Is that what you're saying? As a whole, like whatever, at the basic metaphysical level?
No, I'm not quite saying that. I'm saying that I'm saying that what we see, everything, all I've ever known is the process of becoming.
Sure.
And I'm going, maybe that's because that's what reality is. It's the process of becoming. And if you strip that down to the most basic level, then the beginning of that process of becoming, it seems to me, is not intentionality or desire or anything. It is something which you could best describe with the language of mathematics.
Yeah.
Because that is the simplest information. There's no intentionality in mathematics. The two doesn't.
So then we get into a whole thing of, is mathematics symbolic or is mathematics essential?
I think mathematics is a language with which we can understand this basic informational level.
Okay.
And that allows us to see that basic informational level is going to come up to all of this. Now, because I'm not reductionist, I'm not saying the universe is like a computer. I'm saying that fundamental level of information will become this, and this is not a byproduct or an illusion. It's real and it's wonderful. But that language of mathematics.
But you've also said it's creative.
It's creative because because the very metaphysics, what its nature is.
And that's what I mean by soul. That's what I mean, is that it's life. It's that life force. It's got force to it.
Well, that's a different thing. The idea there's a force and it's a life force.
Yeah.
It's like it's like you're saying that
look at how life was created. I mean, it's still a tremendous mystery in terms of how those electromagnetic processes that led to more molecular sophistication then all of a sudden came into a soup.
But if you put it down to a life force, you're just going back to where we've pulled ourselves out of.
What I've been trying because
that's why I'm thinking of Bergson and the way that all of that was.
I'm not talking about vitalism.
Okay.
I'm not talking about vitalism because I'm saying that the process of life itself is life force. I'm not saying that there's this special.
The process so the evolutionary okay, so you've got a fundamental two-ness. Let's get it round to the mathematics, and that's the simplest we can get. Process, relationship.
Yeah.
And what are you calling soul in that? What do you want to use that word? Because I think I tell you what, I think we need to be careful of.
Yeah.
Is that I see this all the time, Ryan, is that by using these words like consciousness and soul and intentionality and all this, force, life, particularly force, we smuggle in a whole load of ideas that shouldn't be there. And it's like the claim is often made to me, and I think you might be making this claim, that I'm just using a different word for that. But the reason you want to use the different word, not you necessarily, but somebody does, but certainly Kastrup did this, is you're smuggling in a whole load of other things on the basis of it. So now you've got, you're bringing consciousness, but you're smuggling intentionality, and then suddenly you've got a completely different metaphysics. You've got a metaphysics of there already exists a conscious thing with intentions, and then it does the universe and powers it through. Sure. Now that may be true.
Yeah.
I don't know. That may be true. Right. But what the reason it no longer appeals to me, although obviously most of my books, that's exactly what I say.
Sure.
Is that it is that there's this incredibly elegant version which enables me to arrive at all the beautiful things which I know to be true.
Yeah.
Without that.
Well, and that's where I'm trying to challenge
one narrative. There's nothing before the process.
What I'm trying to challenge you on in your thinking is, if you look at the outcome, which is the functionality, and again, we might be going in circles, and that's okay, because I'm really enjoying talking to you about it. If you look at the outcome, which is the functionality, you have a choice, right? You can say, well, the functionality emerged, and it emerged as a process of complexity from simpler to more complex, and it didn't start there. It happened. But with those types of thinking, whether it's the way you're doing it or whether it's the way a materialist does it with the brain creating consciousness, you're still dealing with a similar problem. And that problem is, how exactly does the brain create? Now, before you interrupt me, I'm not saying that you're saying that the brain creates consciousness. I'm saying that the problem of emergence has always been that the devil is in the details. How does the emergence occur? Now I'm saying that another alternative that helps explain the emergence, which no doubt does occur, I mean, there's no doubt that emergence occurs, is to put some of those forces of so-called consciousness or phenomenology into ontological priors.
Of course.
And I'm saying that is also an elegant way of explaining it.
Yeah, but can you see that that's exactly the God twist? Now, I know you're not seeing a creator God,
but that's argument ad hominem. It is because it's saying that's ridiculous. It's saying that the idea. Okay,
it's not saying that. I'm not saying it's ridiculous. Maybe it's true.
Okay,
it's saying what you've done with that is that, because there's an awful lot of people that make exactly the same arguments for a creator. And in a way, what you're doing is a slimlined, more sophisticated articulation of the same thing.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, that's what we're doing.
I don't take that as a bad thing.
So that's what you're doing. So that's what we're looking at. So what I find so attractive about avoiding that is that thing which is already there, the creator of whatever form it is outside the story of evolution. And has qualities, intentions, qualities, it's conscious, all sorts of qualities.
Sure.
So what I'm exploring is, can we actually arrive at an understanding of the universe which is just as rich, which leads for me to a sublime presence which is actually God.
Yeah.
In which everything is in the one narrative, in which the one which is in relationship to itself emerges. And why does it emerge? Because in that process, it isn't becoming, it's a process, every moment will be a new relationship. and will be richer and informed by the past.
Mm.
And that increasing conditioned potentiality will start what? Informing. Information will literally inform the universe, creating forms. Forms that survive have to be, in your language, which is a good language, functional to the degree that they can sustain themselves in relationship with other forms.
Right.
And that level of functionality of being a form and being informed to the degree that they can sustain themselves will increase and increase and increase and increase and increase and increase and increase until you get psyche, until eventually you get something which is even beyond psyche. And everything then is all the information, anything which has a quality other more than being, is the one field of being, the oneness of being in the process of becoming. Nothing before it, nothing, no creator, nothing. And you've allowed it, you've got a just that. And that seems
I love the idea. The
that's
universe
an incredible vision if we could make it work.
The universe is being and in the process of becoming. I think that I love that. I'm just trying to put the intentionality at the beginning. I mean,
I know.
We agree on.
And what I'm trying to say is,
I think
you can get all the understanding you want.
Sure.
Without doing that. And that's what's changed for me. Over the last 10 years, what's changed is I've gone, I can keep all of the understanding which feels right to me and which feels soulful to me without that. And I did think it was impossible.
And that's where I am.
It is impossible.
And that's where I don't.
Yeah.
I'm
and
not sure.
I don't think it is necessary.
Because the universe just as well could have just been, like I said, it could just have been entropic. There's no reason it had to get more complex. There's no reason that it had to become more functional.
No, I think there is. Because
Which
again,
is?
Because of because I don't think the past goes anywhere. So there is.
I know, but even there's a real principle of passivity that starts there at the beginning, which really is functionality in some ways.
Yeah,
I mean, because passivity is very functional. I mean, it's not very functional to just be a series of fleeting things, and then you disappear.
That's what I'm trying to say. So the passivity is the conditioning of being.
So in some way, you do put functionality at the beginning. In some ways, if passivity is there,
that's what I just said to you. That's what I just said to you. So,
okay.
So to the degree that you go, look, the process of becoming is repetition of past patterns in creative ways or novel ways, and the ones that are functional will sustain and go forward, and the ones that are not won't. So there is an impetus, there is a tendency towards greater functionality.
The tendency itself. That's where I'm saying.
Except
there's something to be explained about the tendency. There's something.
Well, not if you root it in the metaphysics.
But the metaphysics is the thing to be explained.
If you're going, look, this is the realization that this is the realization of potentiality, that being is a field which can become informed in any way.
Yeah.
And the image there I've got is like the quantum field. You've got, where you've got one field vibrating in different ways, and the simplest vibration is a bit.
Yeah.
So you've got that image, you've got one field, and it's like from that you can get everything potentially. You don't need anything else. And then that will become all those things. And if you've got the idea that, okay, so the information, once it has been informed, it's informed. That's it. So it's been informed in this way. It now is informed. Then the way it's been informed will now condition how it gets informed next. And then how it gets, so it cannot help but be what we call creative. There's nothing making it creative, but the thing which which is creative will come from it.
But you're killing me with that, Tim, because what you call smuggling, you're smuggling in that it doesn't need anything. I mean, it's like smuggling in a void.
Why am I doing that, Ryan?
Because you're saying it doesn't need anything to drive it. It just happens. You're like, that's also an explanation is what it's like. I'm saying that. So here's my interpretation of what you're saying, and maybe I'm not interpreting it correctly, but just let me say it and then you can respond. What I'm saying is, when you say it doesn't need a driving force to become more functional, it doesn't need any intentionality, I'm saying that is smuggling in an assumption of well, we don't need that. But you're not explaining why we don't need it in a way that I'm satisfied with, because you're
okay. Well, let me try again to do that.
Okay.
If existence is the process of becoming,
Okay.
yeah, that's what it is, and which the common denominator is being, and the becoming is being informed, the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that's enough.
No, it's not, because so here's what I'm trying to say to you. To say existence is being in the process of becoming is to me, from where I would stand philosophically, is not enough of a foundational assumption, because then we have to ask, how come it's a process of being and becoming rather than just a process of being stagnant?
Well,
so there is something process, right, or just a stagnant. So then take out the word process. Now, how come it's not just a stagnant being? And so I'm saying there's still something to be explained.
So that, hence my image. I mean, I think you're right in that you are forced back and back and back,
right.
But you're dealing with so little now,
yeah,
that you've really pared it down.
And that's the littlest part. I would go to the life force.
Is what?
The littlest part to me, where I'm paring it down, would be the life force. That's my ontological prior.
But if
I know you laugh and you laugh, but it's
what the fuck is a life force?
Well, what the fuck is a basic mathematical universe? I mean, I could ask you the same thing.
Well, I think I can define it though to some degree, because you can see relationship underlying everything. So it's like
I can see life force underlying all of creation.
Maybe, but that's a maybe. But relationship is not a maybe, is it?
Well, the life force is what drives relationships. The fact that I contacted you for this conversation,
I don't mean our relationship. I mean
the fact that nature is in a process of complexification rather than just staying as hard, dead matter. I mean, all of that you can see life force. The fact that when the pulsar lets go and then atmosphere,
and all of that. But that, I mean,
yes. We can both agree though that no matter where you start, you have to start with an assumption. And I'm saying that, so you're saying your assumption is better than my assumption, and that could be true, but I disagree. I am
definitely saying that.
Yes, I'm saying I don't agree.
A life force, to describe what it is, you're going to need a lot of qualities. But to describe being, you're seeing something which everything in the universe has, the isness of everything.
The isness of,
and then the qualities
certainly just as vague as life force. The isness of everything.
Is it?
Yeah, that's not any more descriptive. The isness of everything. I mean, that's just using your own phenomenology to explain being. The things exist. I observe things exist.
That's exactly it. I'm saying something as simple as that. Things exist, and all of the thing and everything everything is a quality of that. Everything is an extra quality that informs.
I know, but I'm saying that doesn't explain anything. That's just an observation. That things exist, right?
Pardon?
I just don't think that explains things. I think that that's an observation.
It is an observation,
right? I'm saying that to me, that observation couldn't be. I couldn't put that somehow at the foundation. I don't understand that.
The observation is to lead to what would be the simplest thing that you could see metaphysically.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you need a creator of some force, creative force, some life force, some God or something. Okay. And whether actually it can work the other way around, that the universe itself is that. It will turn, it is it is the thing which will be a life force or whatever it is, the intelligence of it. That is what it is. It is so that you.
If it is that, then we're not having any disagreement.
So the fundamental, it's becoming that. So the fundamental metaphysics, if you like, and this may be just a matter.
Wait, hold on a second.
Let me try this on you a sec. It's that there's a kind of existential nausea, I think, to a lot of metaphysics, where you go, why that and not something else?
You're right about that. Yeah.
So there's a life force at the beginning, or there's a God at the beginning, or there's and it's like, but what's that? And why this and not that? And all of those things that Heidegger had.
Yeah.
there is something, and this is very personal probably, but there is something about the idea that the fundamental nature of the universe is something that could be anything and is becoming everything.
Okay.
Just goes, oh, that doesn't give me nausea. There's something which, of course, what's the fundamental nature of existence? It's not a thing which already exists. It's something that could be anything.
So it's just pure potential.
Which is becoming everything.
I hear you. And you said something a few minutes ago that said life, we get to life force. So well, my question, hold on, I want to ask you, why are you content to use life force then, but not,
well, I wouldn't use life force. I'd say there's passivity which conditions being in such a way that it has intentionality and it moves in the direction.
The thing I want to say about all that is that we have to come up with words to explain the ineffable. And so we use, for example, we use psyche or imagination. And
that's not ineffable.
I mean, in its grand totality, it's certainly hard to capture.
Oh yeah, everything's hard to capture.
Yeah, that's all I mean. I don't mean
that it has a nature.
I'm not meaning that we don't experience the psyche. I just mean there's something about it that's a bit ethereal sometimes in terms of the imagination and the beauty.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I that's all I meant by that.
Sorry. Okay.
What I'm saying is that, like, we have to come up with a language. So we say psyche, or we say soul, or we say life force, or we say love, right? Love. And yeah, sure, you could always look at me and say, Ryan, well, what are you really saying about that? But the thing that I'm saying is that can apply across many of the philosophies, whether it's talking metaphysics or epistemology, that we can always say that. And it's always a good question to ask. What do you really mean by life force?
Yes.
Or what do you really mean by psyche, Tim? And what do you really mean by imagination?
But I will do my best, genuinely, Ryan. This is what I spend all day doing.
Yeah.
Is asking myself those questions. The reason I've ended up here, not where you are at the moment, is because I kept asking that question.
Well, are you suggesting I'm not asking this hard question?
No. I'm not suggesting that for a moment.
Okay, good.
I'm just saying that's exactly. I'm sure you are. You couldn't have this conversation otherwise.
Right. Okay.
We couldn't. You know.
Good. I was just clarifying. I wasn't sure what you meant.
No. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I think you're right, and that's why I can try and define what I mean by psyche.
No, and I think it's good.
I can try and define what I mean by love, and I can try and define what I mean by being, because if you can't, then you do end up with kind of fluffy words.
But and I guess here's my argument, and my argument is that there's a little fluffiness involved in any explanation we're trying to give to the universe in terms of its origins and its. I mean, yes. So when you say being, I'm also suspect of being. So I'm all I'm saying is that it's not an argument. The fluffiness isn't an argument against it. It's an encouragement from one philosopher to another that says try to be more precise, but it's not really an argument.
Let me try, because the reason that I've chosen being, because in Soul Story I call it spirit.
Okay.
And I'm now moved away from that for the very reasons that I think it encourages, and I wanted to really. I still had then a view much more like the one you're exploring.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much was the view I had. Right. And what's changed for me is I've gone, okay, I am smuggling in a whole load of stuff there. So it's the old Greek concept of ousia, of being, seems like the best one, because I can look around me and go, well, look, everything has different qualities. Everything, it's all different. Yeah. What makes it one?
Yeah.
What is the quality in the universe that makes it a universe? Because everything's fucking got different qualities.
I know.
Well, the quality, one of the words you could give to that is ousia, or being. So it has the quality of being. So therefore you have one field of being, which has then got all of these different qualities. And that the evolution of those qualities is the becoming.
Yes. And so when it comes to the evolution of being, which has this just essence of being, I'm saying that as a part of that evolution, there has to be something driving becoming. something. It could be as a simple process of relational information exchange. But I'm saying that I like the word life force for that driving power.
And I'm saying I don't think we need that. That's it.
Yeah.
I had the same thing with Ken with the idea of eros.
With who?
Ken Wilber.
Okay, with Ken Wilber.
He has the eros, and
yeah.
and it's like I think we don't need any of that. It's because if your metaphysics is already in motion, if your metaphysics is this is the process of realization of potentiality, that's what it is, then you've got that process which will
I see, but I see your argument is that if you define it properly, if you define the process properly in a way that is coherent, then you don't need those extra.
You don't need those adjectives.
Right, but there's a bit of a word. There's a bit of a wordiness. There's a bit of a wordiness there.
This is what I've never said it like this. I see if it works. I'm wanting to go. All adjectives are emergent. All qualities are emergent, not the source of qualities.
Okay, so
all
now
qualities are emergent.
I think I'm getting even closer to understanding you now. So if the universe is being in a process of becoming, by definition,
yes,
it doesn't need anything else.
Yes.
Okay. And what I'm saying, I'm ringing the bell over here saying, but I need that explained. I can't just accept that that's just what it is without an explanation of how it works. So I'm saying we gotta put something in there to make it go. And you're saying, no, it just is that is the essence of it. It's a process of, it's being in a process of becoming. That's the most elegant, basic description. But remember though, Tim, as you well know, as an experienced thinker, parsimony is for being as simple as possible, but not too simple. And so that's where I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think I don't think I think that is as simple as I can get, but not too simple.
Yeah, I know you think. I'm sure you think that.
And hence the metaphor that I've got from the quantum soup idea, which is just purely a visual metaphor of it's almost like it's going, these are all now we're moving into the area of poetry, but it's like there's constant, I want to say constant but atemporal, and that's a contradiction, but it's like it's 1 and 0. That's what it is all the time. 1 0 1 0 1 0. Exist not exist. Exist not exist. Exist not exist. It's like that's what it's a uniduality. And every time it comes into existence, that's time, but only time for that thread.
Okay,
no relationship with this thread.
On an absolute, like a universal level, does time not apply?
Well, no, because time is change.
So if
there's nothing to change,
so
then there's
the universe as a totality.
I mean, the universe. Yeah, I think it's time.
Okay,
I think
got it.
The universe is changing.
So time applies across the whole spectrum of
anything which has qualities, anything which is informational.
Is there anything in your theory at this point in the game, not at the origin story, that doesn't have qualities? Does everything have qualities?
Well, the field of being in itself, which you can never separate off. It's not like there is a field in itself, but conceptually you could say that it is atemporal, it is formless, it is the emptiness. Okay. And I think you can come into a meditative relationship with that, for instance.
Can you get to a point in your theory where, so it's in its essence, it's arrived at a state of, for example, sometimes you would talk about the emergence of love, or the psyche, or now let's bring in soul, or life force, or any of these words. Intentionality. Does it have that in that atemporal space?
No, nothing.
Okay,
it has no qualities.
It has no qualities. Got it.
It's literally formless because it's not being informed. It has no qualities.
You know what's so funny though is even the statement "it is" literally. I mean, it's like it is formless.
Yeah,
what's it?
It's not in it.
There is no it.
It's not in it.
Right.
It's not in it. In itself, you would have to say it's nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
The field only exists with the information. The information only exists with the field, because they're actually the same thing.
With the information, so it's a mutually supporting.
It's what I would call it paralogical relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I would describe what I'm exploring not as non-dual, but as unidual, the one as two.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the great secret of, say, Taoism or some of those early.
Yeah, and I've been exploring the idea of polymorphous monism, just like the one in the many.
Oh yeah, same thing.
Yeah,
Same
same
thing.
thing.
Same thing. Because the two is
The problem
you're
I have
becoming
with dual is that for some reason the two doesn't capture the multiplicity for me.
Oh, it doesn't. It
I have
doesn't.
to
No,
think
no.
of it as many. I have to think of it as
Yeah.
polymorphous.
I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But the reason I call it uniduality is it's partly to play off of non-duality, but
Yeah.
also because it goes, look, this is the yin yang. It's like, the one is two, and the relationship between the two is the 10,000 things, to
Got it.
kind
And
of slightly
that's
rewrite Lao Tzu.
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm writing my dissertation on, is the
Ah,
the relationship between subpersonalities and individuation. So maybe we've been talking for quite some time, so I'm sure it's time to start winding down. But
I would love you to say a little bit about that if you've got the energy, Ryan,
I'll
because
say a
I'm
little bit about
fascinated
it.
by it.
I'll say a little bit about it. And basically, where I start is this, and I'm operating within the field of Jungian psychology. So I start with a critique of Jung's system. And one thing to know about Jung is part of him was a structuralist. So he liked to create structures and universals. And so you've got the ego and the anima and the animus and the self. And, and then his followers would then try to fit their own qualitative psychic experiences into those structures. And that's not my favorite part of Jung's thinking. My favorite part of Jung is what you might find in the Red Book or in the certain passages throughout his volumes where he's talking about process. And so I look at his idea of the ego complex. And I say, look, if you start with Kant, which Jung was incredibly influenced by in terms of his writing, we've got the idea of the transcendental ego, right? Because Kant was responding to Hume, and Hume was responding to Descartes. And Descartes said, well, I've got this thinking thing, and then there's the world. And he didn't have an understanding of the body, really, but he thought the mind was this immaterial thing. Anyways, so Hume came along and said, well, there's no ego just sitting there. I'm just a series of experiences. I have one experience and then I have another, and that's all I can ever notice. I mean, and so Hume had this very perceptive criticism. And then Kant said, sensitive to Hume's criticism, he said, well, yes, but there's a coherence. And the coherence is the transcendental unity of apperception. There's something holding it all together so that visually, perceptively, categorically, in terms of time, I have a flow of coherent unity, and the self is a unity. The self must be a unity, and that's the transcendental ego. And the reason it's transcendental is because you can't know it. It's unknowable. You just have to infer it, you deduce it. And anyway, so then Jung comes along, and after Freud, and Freud had the ego. Freud had a major development, which is it's not quite a unity, because the self is all split up into these different contradictions, and the ego is trying to manage it all. So I want to go have sex with this person, but it's not appropriate, so I'm going to try to mediate that because there's these social pressures. And so ego as a mediator. So then Jung comes along and says, no, the ego is a complex of consciousness. It's the thing, it's the subpersonality, it's the part of consciousness that makes consciousness conscious, but there's this whole unconscious that explains why we're a multiplicity. Here's what I'm saying after that long-winded introduction.
That was brilliant introduction. I loved it.
Okay, good.
Really good, really good.
Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that, no, the ego does not explain consciousness. The ego is a word that we started with unity as Descartes. Then into Kant, we tried to reify the unity of the self. Then the depth psychologist came along and said, the self is not quite a unity. We have to explain multiple feelings and motivations. And so we'll explain consciousness by the ego, and then we'll have unconscious things that happen. And so I'm saying, no. if you look at your experience phenomenologically, you don't have a single thing that just constantly acts. You have a series of subpersonalities that come in and out of subjective control. And they can literally control your motor activity and your perceptual, what John Vervaeke would call a salience landscape. He doesn't talk about subpersonalities as far as I know, but I'm taking that term. Creates a worldview, and it's fluctuating. So because of evolutionary demands, we can't be just one perspective. We have to be able to fluctuate. The ego it's a made up organizing factor that has tried to explain conscious personality. So I'm saying, what happens if you throw that out? Just humor me, people. What happens? What happens if you take that out and you say, instead, what we have is multiplicities of consciousness within a total being? Because the where depth psychology went wrong, in my opinion, is its understanding of consciousness is so fragmented, and that its understanding of wholeness then has to become this unconscious thing, like in Jung, the self. It's like, yeah, you have wholeness, but I'm saying our whole being is the wholeness. That's Ryan, that's Tim. It's not that it's conscious or unconscious, it's a wholeness. And then the emergence of activity within that being is particular subpersonalities in the driver's seat of the present moment consciousness. So that because in Jung's theory, you needed the ego to manage individuation. So if you had a good attitude towards the self, you'd have a good individuation process. If you were a lousy ego, you'd have a bad individuation. You wouldn't have, you would have all sorts of shadow dynamics and yada, yada, yada. What I'm saying is individuation now needs to be explained in a different way. Because the problems with the term ego are so overwrought, what happens if we put subpersonalities in there? How does individuation occur? So the research question is basically, we've got multiple parts and we've got a whole. How does the process of wholeness occur in the psyche, given that we have multiple parts? And granted that you'll provisionally allow me to take the ego out to explore that question. And so where will I end up in that? Well, I don't know, but I suspect my ace in the hole is something like a soul, something like an essence, something like and I think the total being, the being is basically synonymous with that, but something that captures the dictum, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, so that at any given moment, I can't be reduced to one subpersonality or another. I'm a whole that benefits from the negotiation of different subpersonalities, but there's not like a little ego that has to manage those interactions. Actually, as a whole being, I have to manage them. It's not this little island. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to drive at?
More than makes sense. I mean, I think it's absolutely on the nail, Ryan.
Awesome.
I mean, absolutely on the nail. I would use slightly different language, of course.
Yes, yeah.
I would say, I think here, I mean, I'm sure nowhere near as developed as what you're doing, but because it's just a small thing for me, but the fundamental idea that I have with that is, see if this is similar, it'll be a different language, which is that I'm a passivity system. I'm a psychobiological passivity system. And on the psychological level, I've built up various and maybe from the start as well, that various subpersonalities, a phrase I really like, to relate to different things. I'm a different person when I'm with you than I am when I'm with my wife, or when I'm blah blah blah, and they constellate into these different aspects of the psyche. I'd use the word psyche for all of that. It's just the way that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
And that I see that again, the ego has no use for me. I see the process of individuation, which I like a lot, as how do you get them to all function together?
Yes.
And the fluidity to move between them as appropriate for the success of the whole system.
That's exactly right.
Because if you can do that, you will have a much more robust psyche or soul.
That's exactly, and that's what I do with clients, is that we put it all out there, and that's their job, is how do I function as a whole human being? And how do I negotiate these subpersonalities? Now, the thing that I make sure to introduce is that not every subpersonality wants that sometimes.
Yeah.
For example, there might be a passivity system, to use your language, that's bent on self-destruction.
Yeah.
So some theories would say, well, every part of us is looking for love. I think that's incredibly naive. I mean, it doesn't nearly scratch. It's like there is a such thing as a mean asshole, and it does exist in me, and it might exist in others. I'm not saying it's a universal trait, but we're not all peachy inside and out. So how do you want to work with it? So people come in to see me, I'm having panic attacks. Or what part of you is creating panic attacks? Because in my model, it's all proactive. It doesn't happen to you. You're doing it. So who is it inside of you that's creating and then we work with it to great effect. So what parts of you don't want to have panic attacks? Well, as the lover, I don't want to have a panic attack.
Brilliant.
Well, as the creative self, I don't want, okay, well, how are we going to work with this, guys? So then we see, well, does the panic attack part have an openness to negotiate? And so the panic attack part either just says yes or no, or maybe, and you respond based on the information you get. So it's fluid, none of it's like, there's not a protocol. This is how you work with subpersonalities. As a facilitator or a therapist, you have to be on your feet. You work with what's there. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve. And the reason I've been so sensitive to the ego as just an unfortunate hang up that we still have is because we use it as an explanation for our everyday behavior in a colloquial speech. And then we use Jung's theory and we talk about the ego and we reify it. And I'm saying, well, wait on a second. What do you mean by ego? Well, I mean the arrogant part of me. Okay, well, what is the arrogant part of you? Talk to me, describe it to me. Well, he really wants to be awesome and he wants everyone to think he's right. Okay, well, let's come up with a name for that. Or the ego is, some people will say, well, it's my self-image, it's my insecurity. So it's like, no matter what they mean when they say ego, invariably they mean something quite specific. And I'm saying we're much better off being phenomenologically descriptive than having this umbrella term, it's the ego, it does. And as you know, in Eastern tradition, the ego means a whole different thing. I mean, it's not quite the same, but I think we need a descriptive psychology, not a category.
When I was in my 20s, Ryan, I had 3 that I can remember. There was probably more, but there's 3 I was so vivid I can remember. Is this what you mean? I had, there was Mr. Monk.
Yes.
Who really thought I should leave the world completely behind and just seek God, and that everything else was a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
He was very strong. Unfortunately, I also had Mr. Rock and Roll and Mr. Hedonist, Mr. whatever, that guy.
Perfect.
And he was just like, creativity, drugs, experience, all this. And then there was my favorite, Major Achievement, who I really did seem like a major, who would come storming in every now and again and go, you've done nothing of value with your life. You need to do something of significance.
Oh my God.
And he would come in. And
is he the one who helps you write books?
Yeah, well, he's they're all still there. But
they're all still there.
What's changed is that they don't argue now.
Oh, so now they get along.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's really
the beauty of the work.
They've all, I don't shoot. I mean, literally, if you looked at my 20s or even certainly my 20s, you'd see me like who was in, for that year, I was Mr. Monk. Literally, I was in a house with nothing in it, doing nothing but meditating.
Right.
A year afterwards, I was in a recording studio taking drugs. And it's like, oh, that was,
well, and we have this societal baggage that teaches us you're supposed to be one thing. And so our cultural conditioning goes against understanding that it's actually okay, and it's actually what it is to be human, and that your multiplicity is not something to hide. I had someone say to me yesterday, we were having coffee. He said, "You're so much different having coffee than when you're in the classroom teaching." And I said, "Well, I presume that when you asked me for coffee, you were asking the friend and not the teacher." And so the idea is that it's about authenticity, and what you picked up on earlier, functional matching of the situation.
Yeah.
I have parts of me that could be very aggressive. And it's not that that's good or bad. it's when is that functional, or can I taper it into assertiveness, or do sometimes I need to back it off, or if somebody tries to hurt me and I need to defend myself, then it's functional. So it's like it's about context, and the value is the value of how it works in the moment,
isn't it? And also then it's like this thing, the individuation.
yeah.
It's that when that part comes out, say that has to go, fuck you, or whatever it's going to do,
Yeah.
that you're not going to be sitting in another part 10 minutes later going, oh God, you should never do that. It's like you've actually got an integration. So the other part's going, oh yeah, that was necessary, but now you
Right.
don't need to do that.
And
or now we can turn it around and say, okay, let's get on.
Exactly. It's being able to repurpose and redesign. And, it's so funny. I'm getting more to the point where I can laugh because, to your point about passivity, I've got a part of me that will sometimes want to go back to the 17-year-old version that's pissed off. And then it's like, oh man, there he goes. But it has no power because I just laugh and I just notice, oh, there it is. And then we bring it back into, and so when you take the shame out of it and you just look at it is what it is, what am I going to do with it? There's a tremendous flexibility of how you grow, how you learn, how you become.
And what you're exploring, I think, is a really good take on the idea of know yourself.
Yeah.
Just a really deep way of going, look, and the way that everything is a oneness and a multiplicity, and you're a oneness and a multiplicity.
Yes. And that's what I'm driving at with my dissertation.
And the key thing is, are you just flipping between the multiplicities, or can you see the oneness, and can the parts of the multiplicity? So for me, all the individuation is it goes in hand with, or is a precursor for, perhaps, to what I call is the unividuation, which is the idea that all of this philosophy I'm exploring ultimately is all about awakening to oneness.
Yeah.
To that place where it's something, the transcendent, immanent oneness of things, God, if you like, if you can use that word.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to do that in an integrated way, then you can enter far more deeply and more consistently into that unividual experience. And half the time what people are just facing when they're going, oh, I can't, it's just like they're split. So
yes.
Exactly. They're so fundamentally split. They haven't got the strong enough foundation. And then you go back to things like the Kabbalah traditions or the ancient mysteries, and you go, oh, this is what they were trying to do. They were trying to, the whole idea of the psychic level of development in the Jesus mysteries was to build that integrated psyche or soul able to sustain the pneumatic or spiritual awakening.
Yes. Yeah. And the way we say it in the model I use, which is called self, soul, spirit, which is developed by the man I've told you about, Roger Strachan, is every human being is a unique mandala of parts. And the mandala is the whole, and the parts are the parts and the functions of that whole. And because of the uniqueness, how that wholeness hangs together, that's your process of individuation.
Yes.
That's your process of becoming.
Yes, absolutely right. Unique. Totally.
Yeah, unique. Yeah. So at any rate, actually, at another point, if you're available, I might ask you some questions about that part-whole relationship, because I'm working in the later chapters now, and this is where it gets very complex, as you know, as you use so the whole ball of wax with how am I going to explain this. And the ego was a tremendously convenient way to explain conscious mediation. It was just well, the ego is like for Jung, it's like the ego assimilates the subpersonality and then it like produces it, and then later in Jung's career produces the affect, and consciousness. And later in Jung's career, he literally writes in Mysterium Conjunctionis, which I know fell off your bookshelf one day in a credible synchronicity, but he writes, contrary to his previous assertions, actually, he writes, the ego is an unfathomable thing full of many obscurities. You could say it's the relatively constant personification of the unconscious. And that's what I grabbed onto. I said, that is so different from anything that he was trying to structuralize about the ego. Now he's saying, no, that those so-called archetypes or complexes are coming in and personifying consciousness through different experiences. So that's sort of the window that I've used for Jungians to say, look, that's where he was going with it, because anyways.
The explanation you gave when you started with Descartes and Hume, and then went all the way through, was really eloquent.
Okay, good. I've been working on it.
It really was. It really, is that lovely thing when somebody understands what they're saying.
Yeah.
It had that quality to it.
Thanks, Tim.
It felt really developed. I could just follow it the whole way.
Okay, good. I'll keep working on it. Hopefully, getting even better. So
yeah,
I appreciate that.
It was. I really felt it was great, and I got it. And as it happened, I completely, get it as well. I mean, I really.
Well, and you clearly do get it, because everything you've said about you've done your own work, so I can tell that it just fit right in. Yeah. So, anyways, we've been talking for hours, so
we have.
I hope I didn't. I hope you didn't wear yourself out, and I didn't wear you out.
I don't care.
I hope you feel. I hope
it's been worth
better.
it. If I'm worn out, it's for a good reason. It's been delightful. I mean, just wonderful. Really great.
I love it, and I got a lot out of it. I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time. So,
me too.
Do you have a preference as to whether or not this gets posted or anything like that?
Not at all.
I'll send you a copy of the recording if you want to download it onto your hard drive. And anyways, I'm pretty slow on podcasting.
If you think it will be of value, we can.
I have no idea. I did it for me.
Yeah, me too. But generally, I have to say, most of what I stick out is really a conversation I'm having for me. I don't really do kind of conversations for the public, which is probably selfish, but it's just the way it is. So it is really, for me, always when I put something out, it's, do you want to eavesdrop on this? If you do, you're welcome.
Right.
It's more like that.
I think that's perfect. Well, I'll send it to you and you do whatever you want with it, and I'll probably throw it up on my YouTube channel at some point.
Okay. Well, if you do, send me the link, and
I will.
I'll share that or
something. I will.
Either way, you have a beautiful mind and a beautiful heart.
You too, Tim. I love you too. Thanks so much for talking.